A man suddenly wakes up in the skin of a monster, in a world that was both foreign and familiar to him. His past occupation, unimportant. His life before, all but gone. All that matters now is survival, both against fate and the machinations of the very beings that spawned him in that world. Regardless, that man was calm, for he knew. He possessed a power and potential that could dwarf most. Disclaimer: the MC may not come off as villainous at first, but his actions later in the story as he grows stronger cannot be classified as anything but villainous. Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Mahito? Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Los Angeles, a sprawling metropolis that dwarfs many other cities in both population and size. The starry skies above shone back, filled with lights at the great city below. Between the fumes and pollution, the star-filled sky shone right back at the many lights of the advertisement boards and skyscrapers that littered that vast expanse of land. A place that had once been well known for its beauty was now nothing more than a joke among both its citizens and those beyond. Once it was considered the sunny upside of a country, housing one of its most profitable and important industries. Entertainment. A cesspool of corruption and filth, some would call it an all-consuming pit of tar. And within that filth was where Marcus found himself, every day of his life. Was he one of the many victims of it? Bound to be taken advantage of constantly for the smallest of roles, for even the smallest glimmer of success? No. Within that city, he was more of a whisper than anything. His name was not known, and he didn't strive for his name to be known, yet anyone who meant anything knew it far too well. Who was he? Well, he was one of the event coordinators for a rather large gala, which every big celebrity frequented. His appearance was that of a 6'3" blonde man, with a lean and athletic build, not hidden at all by the rather form-fitting and tidy white suit which he commonly wore, which accentuated his royal blue eyes perfectly. His hair was always the same, swept backwards, always upkept. He had learned to do it himself, as he needed his appearance to be good at all times. That was his public image, clean and tidy, perfect in every sense of the word. Entirely too perfect. And that was a rather good reflection of his actual night job. Cleaning up after others. Please let me go. The blindfolded man in front of him had certainly seen better days. He had once been a rather high-ranking government official, a member of the DEA even, but he was corrupt. Much like everyone else in that city, he sold the confiscated drugs to celebrities at a high markup. But that was not why he was strapped to a chair in a random warehouse now. No, it was because rumors started about him wanting to tattle about what he saw at certain parties of certain celebrities. Some had seen his gaze looking a bit uneasy as he left apart one night, and that was enough. Don't bother begging. And the man sent to deal with him was none other than Marcus, the most well-known husher in the industry. After all, such a prolific place needed a way to keep its secrets. People like Marcus were that way. Torture, gathering blackmail, silencing victims, getting rid of annoyances. They did everything to cover up whatever the hell their employers did. And they got paid a lot for it. Marcus was a special case, though. Most hushers were half-assed mercenaries who reprofiled to that profession after learning how well it paid. Many were sloppy, hence why a lot of scandals still made their way to the public. But Marcus was different. He had yet to fail at stifling an incident even once. His 100% success rate made him highly desirable. Many tried to have him on call, too, but he didn't really care for that. He took whatever job paid the most at the time, which made everyone bid for him in a way. It maximized his profits, and that was all he cared about. Please, there were so many dash. Look, dude, I don't care. Even if you go and blow the whistle, nothing will change. Do you even know what people were present at that party? B. But if I can just say their names, then it'd all be dash. Their names would just be erased from the record. They have more money than the rest of the world combined. There would just be some idiots taking the fall, then those kids will likely die too, to cover up loose ends. It's better if you just shut up. Marcus was wholly unsympathetic to the man's plight. He had seen it all before. To him, his rich employers were not anything other than scum. But he didn't care. They had power, they had money, so he played along. Right now, his task was simple. It had been to confirm his suspicion that the man would tattle. And that was now all but confirmed after just speaking to him. Whatever he had seen, he was too haunted by it to keep it hidden. And that only meant one thing. It's a bad ending for you as well. Marcus sighed as he picked up one of the surgical knives nicely displayed on a table nearby. He let the light reflect off of it for a moment, landing in the man's scared eyes. His next move was the very definition of practiced and perfect. He sliced the man's neck, severing his carotid artery from behind, letting the blood spill all over the plastic tarp that he had laid out on the ground. Your silence will be appreciated. Marcus sighed, shaking his head as he looked the dying man in the eye one last time. He always made sure to observe the light of his victims leave their eyes. He always made sure that the job was done cleanly. After it was fully confirmed, he didn't bother to start cleaning up, he instead slowly reached onto the table, picking up a flip phone and dialing a number. Warehouse number 9, just one. He didn't wait for any answer from the other side. He just broke the phone in half and threw it in the puddle of blood that was still forming on the ground. He then took off the plastic raincoat that covered his pristine white suit, took off his gloves and slowly straightened his tie. Outside, his car was waiting for him, and he was not scared of being traced there. There would be no crime scene to study at the end of the day, just yet another missing man, in the middle of LA. Or, maybe, he would be ruled a suicide. The cleaning agency always picked its poison in that regard. But the matter was taken care of anyway. As he finally got into his unassuming Honda Odyssey, he sighed and gripped the steering wheel with his ungloved hands. I think this should be enough to quietly retire now. That house by the beach sure was damn expensive. Of course, he would have retired long ago with his pay if it hadn't been for his other monthly expenses, but he got frustrated just thinking about it. Even worse, he had to go visit a money sink right after the job. He drove right out of that area, driving for at least an hour before finally reaching his destination. An extremely large mansion, right on the outskirts of LA, with a great view of the city lights. A large sign at the gates read, Goodwill Orphanage. And it was likely Marcus's most expensive purchase. When he walked in, an old man with a large bald spot and a thick mustache greeted him. The old man was dressed like a traditional head butler, his gaze was sharp and pointed, and his demeanor was serious at all times. By his side, 2 bags were already laid out on the ground, prepared for Marcus to just take and leave with. Your bags are all ready, sir. His aged voice sounded steady and not fatigued despite the very late hour. Good, I will be departing right away. The monthly stipend will continue to come in for the next 50 years. I am going off-grid. Marcus sighed, taking off his coat and hanging it up. He smiled at the butler one last time before taking both bags that had been prepared for him and turned to leave the room, not caring about his coat. There was no further conversation between the two of them, no words of thanks or gratitude, just cold understanding. Have a safe life, sir. The old butler only said those words as Marcus left the room. The blond man couldn't help but run a hand through his hair as soon as he was out of the courtyard of that massive orphanage. Jesus, interactions with Harold are always so tiresome. The orphanage was one of his personal endeavors. Was it a way for him to repent? Not really. He had just killed a lot of people, and because of him, plenty of children were left in the care of the system. He took pity on them, so he built what could only be called a safe haven. He had kept some things in that orphanage, which was why he had paid it a visit. 2 bags filled to the brim with things that Harold had deemed necessary for him to hold on to when he started his new life. Marcus sighed as he walked over to his car and placed both bags in its massive trunk. Opening one, out of curiosity, he couldn't help but sigh when seeing that it was filled to the brim with letters, likely from the children. Opening one, it was filled with talk of gratitude, filled with warmth. The next 3 were the same, and a smile couldn't help but rise on the blonde man's face. Ah, that old man. Always the sentimental one. Marcus shook his head as he closed the trunk. He couldn't spend the rest of the night reading letters. He had somewhere to get to. He drove through the outskirts, heading right for the exit road to Los Angeles. But before he could even blink, a sports car smashed right into the side of his, sending him and his car rolling off the road and into a building. Marcus barely managed to protect his head, as the sturdy car he was in took the brunt of the punishment. But when the situation finally settled, the blonde man found himself with a large piece of glass stuck into his chest. There were also several that he could feel on his face and other parts of his body. He didn't need a mirror to know that he was done for. He could feel the blood rushing out of him. Freaking hell. Looking to the side, he could see who had managed to do him in. A drunk celebrity running a red light. Great. Killed by the very buffoons I used to work for. The man who had crashed into him also seemed dead, but Marcus didn't care at all about that. He just sighed, blood coming out of his mouth. He wanted to take one last breath of fresh air, to do anything, but the last thing his hands got to do was to rearrange his hair. It was almost mechanical, inhuman. At that time, nothing else was on his mind besides annoyance. Maybe I'll meet some of my associates in hell. If there even is one. I doubt it can be worse than this shithole. As he was set to give his last breath before any ambulance even got close to the scene, the tar pit that was LA had claimed another life. But that was not the end of Marcus. No, someone, or rather something, had seen his unsatisfying end and decided to pull him away. Someone like you will do just fine. Yes. An ethereal voice, that was the last thing Marcus heard before it all went dark. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, slowly, unsure. That alone was enough to confuse him. After all, death was supposed to be permanent. After all, death was a rather permanent situation. He had seen enough of it to know that. He knew enough about the human body to tell the glass had cut too deep. Fatal wounds. No saving that. Too many major arteries. The sudden movement of his car had also slightly shifted the glass, which had allowed his blood to spill out. There was no way he could have survived that, even if he had been teleported to a hospital. He'd be dead in minutes. So there is an afterlife then? Is that why I am stuck in place, unable to move? He could feel it. His body, if he still had one, was unable to move. He felt the tight constraints around it, which seemed to shift slightly every time he struggled to move. But nothing worked yet. He couldn't even move a finger. I mean, still better than living in some parts of Los Angeles if you ask me. The devil really gotta learn to do better. Humans have long surpassed him in how vile they are. But there was no sound of fire around him, there was no heat, and there was no coldness either. The deceased blonde man felt an odd, familiar warmth around him. It felt nice, it felt cozy, even though it was also suffocating. This is all well and good. But what exactly is this strange sensation? He felt in control? He could feel his muscles shifting, still forming. He felt that he had full control over each and every part. He could feel every inch of his body, but he couldn't feel any organs. Am I a baby? No. From the musculature I can feel, I should be in the body of an adult at the very least. There was also something else. It was odd, something he had never experienced before. It was as if he could feel something like blood flowing through his entire body. But it wasn't a liquid. Feels like electricity coursing through my veins constantly, yet it does not shock my muscles, it does not even heat me up. It felt as if his body was radiating energy, and more was gathering in one place, right underneath his skin. With a raised eyebrow, he began to focus inward a bit more. He could feel that energy taking a form, a strangely human shape. Is this my soul? Why does it feel so vile? It was just a feeling, he had no way of knowing it for sure, but at that point, since he had died and was now elsewhere, it was quite fair to assume that souls existed, and if so, then he could now feel his. The amount of negative emotions that his soul seemed to emanate also took him by surprise. And it wasn't just his soul, his surroundings in general, that strange electricity that coursed through him, it was all seemingly radiating hatred and negative emotions. It would normally feel repulsive to a regular person, but Marcus just felt that it was strangely familiar. He was used to being surrounded by negative emotions in his past life. At every corner of every week, there was another task waiting for him. There was always another life to cut short or yet more knowledge about whatever messed up things happened in the privacy of some rich bastards' homes. He did everything from high-profile body disposal to chauffeuring around people who needed extra protection. He stood witness to many crimes, and stood watch while many atrocities were committed. He watched the helpless eyes of many victims throughout his career. The fear he felt from them at that time, the one he saw in their eyes, was similar to the one that was now surrounding him. Fear and hatred were born in humans for other humans. But what he felt before were mere inklings of that hatred. But what he felt now was a lot more alive. It felt as if that hatred was now manifested. And that manifestation was forming somewhere deep inside his soul, still evolving in a strangely macabre way. What the hell is going on? Marcus sighed as he relaxed his senses. He wanted to shake his head, to shake those thoughts away for a moment, but he couldn't move a muscle, despite feeling like he could control every inch of his body. He didn't know where he was or why he was there. For a moment, the thought that he had survived and was somehow kidnapped reached his mind. Was he being used for some messed up experiments? It was hard to tell, especially since there were no voices to hear, no other sensations other than his muscles and bones wriggling and forming around his soul. It seems my body is slowly taking the shape of my soul, as hazy as it is. The concept of a body mimicking a soul was somewhat familiar to Marcus, but it was far too soon to come to any conclusions. But the time to finally move came rather soon. Or it felt soon. His mind seemed to wander in places for a while before he finally noticed he could move a finger. And when he moved a finger, the walls around him seemed to collapse, his arms immediately stretched and broke apart the membrane that had surrounded his body. It felt unnaturally easy. The hatred that surrounded him and coalesced into his soul was now acting as a strengthening force. And that fleshy membrane provided no resistance as he ripped it apart and jumped out of it, rolling forward and looking around in a panic. He had expected to see people around him, maybe his captors or something, anything, but he didn't expect his entire surroundings to be what looked like a sewer of flesh and blood. Was I just born in a sewer from a gigantic womb? It was a disgusting notion to Marcus, but he had no other way of interpreting the situation. That electrifying hatred he felt deep within his soul seemed to flare up at the notion, as disgust filled him slightly. But that energy wasn't enough to affect his mind. He was used to keeping his cool. Looking around, he couldn't help but scowl as the stench finally started entering his nostrils. But regardless, he walked forward, swaying from side to side as he headed for the murky water of the sewers. In that murky water, he could see his reflection, slightly different from before, though. His previously prim and proper short blonde hair was now long and messy. His previous royal blue eyes were now a deep purple, and his perfectly sculpted face looked off. His facial structure stayed the same, it just looked like someone had cut his face and stitched it back together. It looked similar, just wrong. Still, finally taking in his appearance, Marcus's eyes couldn't help but widen, as a name finally appeared on his mind. Wait, am I Mahito? Anime had never been a passion for Marcus, but he did have several hobbies outside of his job. After all, it sometimes took weeks for him to receive a task due to how intense the bidding wars for his services were. Gaming, anime, reading, writing, drawing, singing, he had indulged in just about everything on a superficial level. Jujutsu Kaisen was one of the anime/manga he had seen before. The prospect of a shounen story taking place in a world entirely run on hatred and negative energy was intriguing, to say the least. It had resonated with him in a way. The atrocities that he saw on a regular basis were also somewhat empowering to him. He had vowed to do anything in his power to never become a victim. He had killed, silenced, bribed, blackmailed, and he had done everything humanly possible. Yet, there was only so much a human could do in the end. He ended up as another car-crashing statistic. All it took was a second's lapse in attention, as he was finally retiring. Maybe the few letters from children from earlier had softened his nerves enough to allow for such a moment to occur. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered most was where he was now. I am inhabiting a special grade cursed spirit, in this world ruled by power. For a moment, a wide smile spread on Marcus's lips, his unnaturally white teeth shining slightly as his purple eyes seemed to burn with cursed energy. At the end of the day, Mahito had arguably one of the most powerful curse techniques in the world. A damn near instant kill to all sorcerers who had no perception of the soul and didn't know how to protect it. Though from his knowledge, he still knew that he was in danger. He needed to do one thing, and do it quickly. In this life, I will get my freedom. But first, I have to get the hell out of Japan. Unfortunately, in his excitement and confusion, the newly born special grade cursed spirit failed to notice the figure that had walked up behind him. Good. You're awake. Marcus immediately turned around, his muscles shifting slightly as all of his fingers melded together and formed a blade, reaching towards the ground. That was unnaturally easy to do. What a convenient technique. Unfortunately for Marcus, the person in front of him was not someone he could take on with just a blade or two. Welcome to the world of Jujutsu, cursed spirit. From the shifting shadows in front of him, the silhouette of a tall, lean figure with long black hair tied in a loose man bun walked out. A pair of deep violet eyes glinted beneath stray bangs, his mouth portrayed a calm and composed smile, amicable, but noticeable, deceitful to someone who was used to hanging around actors. His gold monk's robes drape over dark yukata, white tabi and zori, completing his composed, striking silhouette. The most striking feature of his? The stitches that stretched across his forehead. Shit. Of all people, it just had to be him. Kenjaku was an ancient monster. Marcus, although not fully remembering every single bit of the lore of the JJK world, still knew that the corpse-stealing sorcerer was bad news. Over 1,000 years of experience in battle, a powerful curse technique, reverse curse technique, likely a domain as well, though the blonde cursed spirit didn't remember if it was ever shown. He's the furthest from someone I can take on right now. Even if I touch him, I won't be able to damage him because of how sizable his cursed energy is. He is also very likely aware of the soul, seeing as his can move around from body to body. In short, Kenjaku was one of the few people in the world who could kill Marcus very easily at that point. Well, any special grade sorcerer could do the job at that point. Kenjaku just happened to be one of the strongest people ever. Well, you seem quieter than I expected. Could it be that you are unable to speak? The sorcerer inhabiting Suguru Geto's body scratched his chin, the relaxed smile on his face still present. Marcus was about to scowl, but he immediately hid it. His acting skills were thankfully proficient enough. I can't, spoken dash. Unfortunately, Marcus's Japanese skills were low to non-existent. As in he had only ever heard it being spoken around him by a scant few, and within the shows he had watched. Oh well, I guess you were just born. Don't worry, I'll gladly help you learn it, if you let me. Kenjaku extended his arm with a smile on his face, expecting a handshake. Marcus blinked a few times, somewhat understanding the man's words before nodding and shaking his hand with a relaxed grip. He probably hopes that I'd try something, so that he can put me in my place. But I am not that stupid. Still, it is better to act as an infantile cursed spirit for now. Thank you. The blonde curse's speech was just as broken as before, and he returned Kenjaku's fake smile perfectly. Ho! Rather friendly for a special grade cursed spirit born out of hatred, aren't you? Marcus just did his best to act confused as he tilted his head to the side, his wide eyes looked entirely innocent. The act seemed to fool Kenjaku, or at the very least, it didn't rouse any suspicion from the monk-dressed body snatcher. At the end of the day, there was no preset way for a newly born curse to act, especially for a special grade 1. They would normally be capable of speech, and they would be territorial and hateful. But that fully depended on what they represented. Regardless, they were all capable of learning. Most grade 2 curses and above could technically talk after all. And for now, Kenjaku could feel that Mahito was a fully fledged special grade curse, just an infantile one. Meaning he was more than capable of learning things like a human. Marcus had, after all, just come out of a stationary curse womb that Kenjaku had been watching for weeks. The ancient sorcerer had fully known what rank the curse spirit would be. He had set up numerous barriers to prevent the modern jujitsu sorcerers from detecting his presence in those musty sewers. After all, he was still looking for a suitable technique for his plans. Any special grades could be useful to him. Interesting. Well, let's get you to a library at least, you have a lot of learning to do. And so, Marcus started his learning journey under the tutelage of one of the smartest beings in the world. Well, it was a rather loose tutelage. Marcus was left with a few books to study at first, and Kenjaku only came in from time to time to speak to him, to check on his progress. 1 week. That was all that it took for Marcus to completely master the Japanese language. His mind seemed to work a lot faster than that of any regular human. However, he didn't show it. He kept his speech broken in some ways, showcasing a rather lacking growth rate in Kenjaku's eyes. But that was fine, there was still time in Kenjaku's eyes. Marcus came to display a rather interesting cursed technique. He informed the fake monk/cult leader, in his stilted speech, that he could freely manipulate his own body to take any shape and turn into different materials. It was decently powerful, but Kenjaku didn't outright need it for his plans. That was exactly what Marcus wanted. Kenjaku was aware of the soul, so it was hard for him to manipulate his soul minimally enough for the ancient sorcerer not to notice. The newly born special grade curse was slowly getting used to that world, to his new situation. Nothing was really going his way from the start, but at the very least, he could bide his time. Sukuna's vessel had not yet been mentioned to him, so he still had time. Kenjaku thankfully decided against consuming him and controlling him with his stolen curse technique. Marcus had not showcased a technique that the ancient sorcerer would find interesting to use. Still, it made him decide to add the blonde special grade curse to the ranks of the disaster curses. Which led Marcus to his current situation. Hello everyone, I am so glad that we all could make it. The fake Suguru Geto smiled as he, in the eyes of the regular people around him, spoke out to no one in particular while sitting by himself at a cafe, occupying a table of 4. But if any sorcerer was present, then they would be able to feel the sheer amount of cursed energy radiating into the air, all coming from that table. This one here is Mahito. He will be joining our merry group. Kenjaku pointed towards the only cursed spirit standing by the table. Mahito, a tall, muscular and humanoid figure, lingered by the table. His patchwork face was calm, and his purple eyes were unreadable. Long dirty blonde hair hung, reaching to his lower back, in tied strands. And stitches crisscrossed his body like a puppet sewn by hand. He was draped in a tattered black shawl and dark pants. He looked almost human. Almost. Marcus had already received the name of Mahito, and he took it without any complaint, as he didn't see the need to stick to his old one. Marcus was a fake identity anyway, and it would have been suspicious for him to suggest an English name when he was born as a Japanese curse no longer than a week ago. Regardless, he had changed names at least 20 times in the 36 years he had lived in his past life, so it was no big deal. Greeting, fellow curses, he waved at the disaster curses occupying the table with a smile on his sharp, patchworked face. Ho ho, he can barely talk. How young is he again? No matter, I won't judge. We are here to greet another one of us. A new human. One of the curses seated at the table spoke out. It was, of course, none other than the loudest. Jogo, hunched and cane in hand. He had a small smile on his face, showcasing his ashen teeth, as he gazed towards Mahito. His hatred seemed to only be extended towards all of humanity. His volcano-shaped head smoldered faintly, his single eye shone with excitement, a stark contrast to his gray skin and mouth of black teeth. He was draped in black with a spotted cape and white scarf. He carried the air of an old man, likely the oldest among the disaster curses. Indeed, it is a pleasure to see our forces grow in this tumultuous period. A feminine voice sounded within the minds of everyone at the table. Mahito couldn't help but smile as he immediately recognized it as the voice of Hanami. She sat silently, a towering, pale figure traced with black lines and crowned with branch-like eyes. Her flowered shoulder and stitched limbs peeked from beneath draped cloth and loose black pants. She looked far from human, but she seemed to radiate an air of kindness. As kind as a being made out of malice could be. Gulag, the last one to speak, was none other than Dagon, still as a cursed womb. Draped in white cloth, Dagon had a rather simple appearance for an abomination from the depths of the ocean. He was bright red, with a round head, striped tentacles around his mouth, and wide, unblinking eyes. He also had 2 humanoid, muscular red arms, each having 4 fingers. Dagon was not yet capable of speech, but for some reason, the cursed spirits at the table, and Kenjaku, seemed to understand it. Now then. How about we move to the next topic of discussion? Kenjaku smiled as introductions ended. And that is the vessel of Ryaman Sukuna, who is currently being guarded by none other than the strongest sorcerer, Gojo Satoru, he continued in the same cheerful tone. He didn't seem to be all that worried about Gojo, but that was neither here nor there. Kenjaku had already seen plenty of the strongest sorcerer in each era. To him, Gojo Satoru was not invincible, just a roadblock that needed to be removed. Of course, I still can't see what's so hot about that bastard. Gojo Satoru. Jogo immediately scowled. At the end of the small table, Mahito couldn't help but heave a sigh inward. Oh boy. I guess we're at this point in the timeline. Marcus, or rather Mahito, still broadly remembered the major plot points of Jujutsu Kaisen. He knew that Jogo was about to get the beating of a lifetime, but he didn't speak out in any way. He saw no reason to. In the first place, I think Mahito would have appeared later on in the story. He should have been born in a month or 2 from this point. Some time frames were still shady in his mind. but he at least knew what to look out for. One thing he had noticed was that he was born early. Kenjaku himself had remarked that at some point, his soul had fully matured seemingly overnight. It was unusual, but special grade curses were known for being unique. A precedent for a human soul taking over a cursed spirit in the womb didn't exist, so the thought didn't even cross Kenjaku's mind. And there was a good reason for that. My soul, right now, is not that of a human. It was something he observed as he walked through the streets for the first time. No one was able to see him, of course, but he could see them, he could see their souls. It would have felt lonely if not for the fact that he couldn't really feel the same type of kinship with them as he had in the past. It must have been the sheer amount of hatred that formed his very body. The fear that humans had for their own kind. As a cursed spirit, he was far too different from a human. And as a special grade, he was inexplicably stronger. Mahito felt as if he could manipulate their souls to his will at the simplest touch of his palm. And, despite his previously human past, Marcus was not bothered by the thought at all. He felt a desire to experiment with his technique on them, to properly check what worked and what didn't. That was surely how Mahito felt as well. As a newborn curse, he had no reason to resist such desires either. But Marcus was different. He felt that it was tasteless to take in and manipulate the souls of helpless humans. He felt odd, thinking of humans with the same fondness that he would have a pet in the past. But at the same time, he knew there were some humans whose lives would provide more value to society if they were stuffed in his pockets as small, fleshy totems. All his previous life, he had lived amongst parasites that used their powers similarly to the original Mahito. Rich men used their influence to manipulate and morph the minds of the people around them, making all of their actions acceptable and without recourse. He had been a cog in that machine as well, helping them keep their noses clean and out of the water. He had inside knowledge on a lot of dealings within that Hollywood sphere, and it was no wonder that he had never made it out of that god-forsaken city. Even his death, he suspected that it was the doing of one of his more influential former clients. No one but a scant few knew that he was retiring, but money could move mountains and ruin friendships at the snap of a finger. Really, some people just deserve to end up as transfigured humans. No point in dwelling on that. Marcus was no longer of that world, he was now in a completely new world. With a new identity and new worries. Kenjaku made some of the people he had worked for in the past look like circus clowns with how evil he seemed to be. But that evilness was not one born out of hatred, he was just selfish. He cared for none but himself and his entertainment. That was exactly what made him so difficult to deal with. Mahito knew one thing. He had to get stronger, get a better understanding of his cursed energy and technique. And so, the special grade curse wondered how to explore his abilities. Manipulating human souls was morally dubious in one aspect. But regular humans were also weak in general, they would break if modified recklessly. He already had a basic framework from what he remembered from the show, but he also had his own ideas on how to use his technique. As he pondered on those ideals, the special grade curses at the table continued to argue, mainly Jogo, claiming he could go and off Gojo Satoru right away, even saying he'd add the prison realm to his collection instead of using it on some mere human. It was funny to hear, especially when considering how weak Jogo was to Gojo. Very well then. You can give it a shot, Jogo. Just remember, you will die. Kenjaku, like always, didn't seem to care if Jogo was to die. Maybe he's looking to fully test how powerful Gojo is. Quite reckless of him, Mahito didn't voice out his thoughts. He kept an innocent look on his face as he looked back and forth between the ancient sorcerer and the volcanic cursed spirit. Jogo then did something that Mahito had forgotten would happen. The temperature around the entire table rose, and, in an instant, humans started catching fire all around the restaurant. The smell of burnt flesh was familiar, the screams of agony the same. It all felt so much more real than in the show. Thankfully, Mahito managed to control his emotions, not react in any way to the volcanic curse's departure aside from a friendly wave. Hanami, I'll rely on you to rescue him after he loses. Gojo isn't likely to kill him right away. Kenjaku slowly stood up as well, brushing the ashes of a server off of his shoulders before nodding to the Hanami, the forest special grade curse. Hanami didn't respond, she merely nodded and slowly left, Dagon following behind her. Kenjaku also didn't stick around, he smiled and headed for the exit. Mahito, it's better if you take some time to get more accustomed to cursed energy and your technique. Remember to stay out of sight. To Mahito's relief, Kenjaku didn't plan on taking him along for whatever ride he was heading on. Good. This gives me some time at least. And so, Mahito left the restaurant, glancing only once towards the carbonized remains of the humans that had worked or relaxed there. May your pitiful souls rest in peace. But I can't afford to show much weakness now. He didn't perform any action aside from sparing them a thought. He was concerned about Kenjaku still keeping an eye on him. As soon as he left the cafe, he sighed, as the people walking the streets seemed to seamlessly part, making way for him. No commotion or any sign that the screams of those suffering inside were heard, as it seemed that Kenjaku had erected a barrier ahead of time. It seemed to serve more than one effect. One was to soundproof the inside, the other was to prevent regular humans from wanting to go in. It was wondrous. Seeing the types of ways that jujitsu sorcery could affect the minds of others. Still, jujitsu sorcerers were going to find those bodies later, but that would likely only happen after Jogo made his move, trying to claim the title of the strongest from Gojo. Their battle was going to happen that same night. Mahito already knew how it would end and that it would alert the jujitsu world to the presence of the disaster curses. It was all likely part of Kenjaku's plan, somehow. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Jogo go in the first place. None of that concerns me now, though. First things first. Let's find a secluded area. If I'm to thrive in this world, I'll need allies. Or tools. Mahito sighed as he walked around the sewers where he had been born. It was a sprawling network of rusted pipes and a literal river of sewage, the underbelly of a city bursting with life above. Thankfully, some parts of the sewer were no longer in use, especially older ones, those that were closest to the subway stations. Those forgotten pockets of darkness made for a surprisingly ideal base of operations. Mahito was thankfully not repulsed by the smell. Many curses seemed to gather in those abandoned tunnels. And they served him quite well. How shiny, the blonde curse muttered to himself as he held up 3 small, pearl-like objects in his hands, allowing them to glisten in the dim moonlight that breached the grates above him. Transfigured fly heads. Pretty weak individually, maybe even more so than humans. But the sheer number one can find? He had nearly 100 of them already. Tiny marbles nestled within makeshift flesh pockets inside his body. Those pockets could shift freely, opening anywhere on his skin as he pleased. Each marble within his makeshift storage held a small curse. Individual concerns that bordered on fear, small misunderstandings that grew into hatred, even the slightest petty, negative feelings from civilians, would manifest into such insect-like curses. They were weak, not even considered grade 4. But to Mahito, they were a good confirmation of what he had wanted to learn. Curses, no matter how small, all have a soul. Fly heads were maybe even more fragile than the regular human, but combining them with idle transfiguration could theoretically lead to a stronger transfigured curse that Mahito could control. And that was his goal. Let's try and build a subordinate for now. He started small, 10 flyhead souls. He moved to mold them together into the shape of a humanoid figure. It was a tall and burly humanoid curse, only a head shorter than Mahito himself. Two large bug eyes, a gigantic set of insect wings, and a mouth filled with strangely human teeth. It was brown in color, with different shades of it littering its body. Each shade seemed to be representative of at least one fly head. Its body was mostly covered in strange protrusions and exoskeleton-like shells. It had two sets of hands, one more ant-like, ending in what seemed to be sharp blades, while the other appeared strangely human. I think I'll call this a fly soldier. Sounds fair and dash. Mahito didn't even get to finish his sentence before his construct blew in his face, scattering pieces of cursed flesh all over the place. Right. That was a thing. Forcing a soul far beyond its original shape, reshaping it into something entirely new, that much strain could make it collapse inward. It was the same for combined souls. Well, combining them made things even more unstable due to Mahito's inexperience. The souls seemed to be rejecting each other a tad too much to keep such a shape. I should at least try to shape them individually first. So, when he touched the next marble, he tried to make something simpler. A sword, more like a cutlass in shape, with the fleshy handle perfectly molded to his hand. It was simple, almost too natural, and swinging it felt nice too. The special grade curse left a long and deep scar on the wall in front of him with a single swing. He felt as if he could entirely rip that wall apart if he wanted to. His strength, as a special grade curse, far outshone a vast majority of that world's sorcerers. The blade itself seemed to still be sturdy and sharp, and it remained stable for at least 10 seconds. Mahito could feel its structure losing strength beyond that point, so he threw it to the side, allowing it to explode into dozens of small, steel-like bone shards. Some shards hit him, but as they didn't damage his soul, they could easily be ignored. Some hints of dull pain are felt. But it seems that as long as my soul isn't damaged, I won't be in too deep a pain to hinder my movement. He remembered Mahito constantly flinching and feeling hits from even the likes of Nanami Kento. Nanami might have been a strong grade 1, but he lacked a true understanding of the soul. His blows never truly hurt Mahito, not where it counted. But as a newborn curse, Mahito was not used to pain when facing him. Even the dull pain from those purely physical hits was enough to make him flinch and recoil. It was at least a large enough distraction that he was left open to hits from Sukuna's vessel, Itadori Yuji, who could damage him. If I were to face the two of them as they were in the show, then I think I'd be able to win easily enough. He had the battle experience, he had the critical thinking required in such moments already trained to an extreme. He only needed experience with his technique, all facets of it. Mahito also closed his eyes as he manipulated his body and expelled all of the shards that had pierced his body. It felt natural, manipulating his body. He felt in control of every single strand of hair, every single muscle. With a smile, he slowly clenched his fist and turned it into a meter-long curved blade. This one feels a lot sturdier. With a swing, the blade extended, his wrist unraveling into a fleshy chain. It struck the wall with a harsh crunch, cracking stone and blasting dust into the tunnel. Speed is a bit lacking, but I can work on that as I grow. Mahito calculated that his strike was fast enough to take a grade 1 sorcerer by surprise, but anything above that could easily outclass him. As a recently born curse, Mahito had boundless potential ahead of him. First thing I should do. Learn how to manipulate souls better, see what clicks. I should also see just how far I can take my own soul's manipulation. He had a long road ahead of him, but at the same time, he had quite a few weeks at his disposal. The first thing he focused on was figuring out just how souls resonated with each other. He quickly discovered that he had been stupid to expect himself to create a fly soldier on his first try. The souls of the fly heads were weak. They had little to no resistance when being meshed together. He had just been far too hasty when pulling all of the souls together. He tried again. Slower this time. Fusing them one by one, letting the bonds form naturally, adjusting to the rhythm of each soul's resistance. He also wanted to later on compress them into smaller forms, so that he could carry the combined souls around freely. It was technically possible if the souls resonated enough, or if he found some way to forcefully bind them. Shaping them was easy, it only took imagination. But doing it by force? Wasteful. Even if fly heads were plentiful, gathering them was still a chore. Mahito had spent an entire day wandering the sewers. He gathered only around 100. But that was enough for him to play around with for a while. Let's start working towards it. A small personal army that I can keep in my pockets. What a waste. 1. Mahito was only able to conjure one stable fly soldier after a week of trial and error, collecting more and more fly heads, trying again and again. That one soldier he judged to be around the strength of a third-grade curse, at least in the amount of cursed energy it had. But as an abomination birthed from the conjoined souls of around a dozen insignificant fly heads? It was substantial, to say the least. That fly soldier looked just the same as the one he had originally conjured, but he looked more reliable. The eyes of the soldier seemed to contain the slightest hint of intelligence. It was only intelligent enough to follow orders and understand them. It could not communicate, nor could it form any thoughts or judgments. Still, considering the materials used, this is quite good. Fly heads were usually mindless, powerless. They were too weak to even use as training exercises for fledgling jujitsu sorcerers. They were mostly just used by sorcerers to spot other potential sorcerers, since only someone attuned to cursed energy to some extent would see them. They were not even considered 4th grade, they were nothing more than a nuisance. During his time in the sewers, he had also managed to acquire other materials, 2 3rd-grade curses, and 1 2nd-grade curse. Curses just wriggling around among the sewers were his main targets, and some were not fly heads. The more dangerous the curse, though, the more likely it was that jujitsu sorcerers were on their way to execute it. This added another factor to Mahito's hunt. Avoiding the sorcerers. Of the few stronger curses he found, though, only 1 or 2 survived his clumsy attempts at compression. The more cursed energy the target had, the harder it was to do. Which was why fly heads remained his easiest target. Aside from regular humans, of course. Technically, even regular humans had more cursed energy than fly heads, so the non-graded cursed spirits made for perfect practice as Mahito continued to perfect his technique. The fly soldier he had created was a merger between 13 different fly heads, their souls too weak even to resist the pull as Mahito mended them together. The fly soldier's body was filled with stitches similar to Mahito's own, but it was still around a head shorter than the original concept. Fly heads were initially small and insignificant things. Stretching them too far risked breaking them apart too quickly. I think I found the perfect balance. It was wonderful, just how much a developed mind could do with such a powerful and versatile technique. What was even more amazing was when Mahito realized just how much control over his body he could exert. Sukuna was the perfect sorcerer because of his 2 mouths and 4 arms. Well, Mahito could replicate that form with a casual thought. It took less than a second to grow arms, a mouth, and some extra pairs of eyes. He could even see through those eyes and speak through the mouths perfectly. Hell, he could give each of his hands a mouth. He could grow a separate set of 4 arms on his back as well. Even if they were temporary, as his soul tended to revert to its original state after a while, he could maintain such a form effortlessly. There was quite literally no limit to the shapes that his soul could take. Was Mahito in the show like this as well? Marcus could vaguely remember that Mahito was an infant, slowly trying to discern just what the shape of his soul was. But to him, everything seemed rather clear. He could see his soul clearly, its shape. His physical body mimicked it perfectly. He looked like a mishmash between the Mahito that he had seen in the show and the body he had inhabited in his past life. Well, his past life's body likely mimicked his soul anyway. But the odd thing was that it felt a lot stronger than all the other special grade curses he had seen. The only soul stronger than his he had encountered was Kenjaku, but that was understandable. Kenjaku was a millennia-old monster, and he was still growing as a curse with his technique and understanding of cursed energy. Mahito's soul had seemingly been consumed by his own in a way. Either that or his soul just occupied the empty husk that was the still-forming special grade curse called Mahito. The best part about having kept his memories was that his imagination was also still just as good. Looking at the scarred wall in front of him, Mahito smiled as his palms pressed together. 2 holes appeared on his palms, leaking a red liquid. That red liquid mashed itself together as Mahito manipulated it, compressing it more and more, all the way until steam was coming out of his closed palms. Mahito's smile grew wider, to deranged proportions, as the steam hissed audibly, while the liquid was compressed more and more. Cursed blood manipulation. Piercing blood. In an instant, a dark red arrow spurted from his palms, immediately hitting the wall at an unbelievable speed, piercing through it effortlessly, and continuing further and further, piercing through all walls and likely a few curses that still lingered in those sewers. The special grade curse couldn't help but laugh as he had finally also succeeded in replicating a curse technique using his own. Of course, as a curse, he didn't really have blood in a natural sense. It was merely a manifestation of cursed energy, a liquefied version, if you will. But Mahito had absolute control over it regardless. Every aspect of his body was replicating his soul, and his soul was something he could manipulate freely. The blood from the arrow fell on the ground, splattering on it before Mahito retracted it all within his palms. He didn't really need to pull off any tricks like the flowing red scale, or turn his blood into weapons. His entire body was a weapon. He didn't need to rely on that. But piercing blood could be a powerful attack if used correctly. Especially since his cursed energy was not exactly beneficial when mixed with the blood of a regular sorcerer. It was likely even more poisonous to humans than the blood of the cursed wombs. So he had that advantage over Choso. But what made him attempt such a strange undertaking anyway? Well, the special grade curse took inspiration from none other than Sukuna, the king of curses. Sukuna had also managed to mimic the piercing blood technique of the Kamo clan. He did so using the 10 Shadows technique, and he could manipulate water thanks to one of his Shikigami. My idol transfiguration is just as, if not more versatile than the 10 Shadows, it just felt natural to try it. He could manipulate his soul into anything physically possible, make clones of himself, manipulate his cursed blood, manipulate and use the souls of others, create cursed soldiers that fought for him. Those were just some of the things that he could think up on the spot, but Mahito was sure that he could come up with even more applications for his abilities. In the end, it all relied on his ability to manipulate the soul, and he needed to train it more and more. It was overwhelming, just how much he could still grow. But he knew that just focusing on his technique was not enough. Control over cursed energy came naturally to him, but his overall understanding of said energy still needed some work. Aside from understanding, he also needed something else. Experience. I do feel like I need more combat experience when compared to some of the monsters in this world, though. I should probably start working on that while I also improve the fly soldiers. Deep in the sewers below the streets of Tokyo, a rather bloody struggle was happening. Many figures struggled fiercely, and they all looked eerily similar. In the shifting shadows of those interconnected tunnels, they appeared to be burly men, but upon closer inspection, they were essentially insects with human forms. They had no features that were human, they were fully covered in an exoskeleton. They all had wings on their backs, and they all had 4 arms. One of the three had humanish arms covered up in a brown exoskeleton. It was like that all the way up to its wrists, where they ended up in blades, extending another half a meter. The strange creature swung its blades all over, trying its best to touch even a hair on their target's back. The target in question was a more humanoid-looking shadow, a taller, toned and lean figure, with a body filled with patchwork-like scars. It looked as if someone had tried to create a doll out of human skin. Locks of blonde hair flowed widely on its scalp, reflecting brightly in the dim moonlight, individual strands of hair moving independently to redirect blades. The bladed fly soldier tried nonetheless, its bladed arms moving more erratically as it seemingly tried to push its opponent into a corner. But Mahito was not so easy to hit. He stepped backwards, and his arms swung backwards, his elbow turning into a fleshy string and his hand into a gigantic hammer. With a single swing, the string moved like a tail, and the hammer whipped right into the fly soldier, sending it flying into a wall. The entire part of the sewers trembled at that contact, the walls cracked, and the fly soldier itself was embedded within the wall. Before the special grade curse could even breathe, another soldier jumped towards him. It had been crawling on the ceiling, waiting for an opening. It took his extended hammer hand as an opportunity, and it immediately tried to pounce on him. Mahito smiled, reveling in the strangely developed instincts of his creations as four burly fists tried to smash down onto his head. It would have worked perfectly, but his long blonde hair immediately shifted. With but a thought, his hair turned into a weapon, expanding almost instantly and pushing upwards and crushing the fly soldier into the ceiling violently like a clenched fist, cracking it alongside most of the exoskeleton covering the transfigured creature. In that very moment, another two fly soldiers rushed at him, one trying to cling onto his lower body, while the other tried to swipe its bladed arms at his head. Unfortunately for them, the special grade curse they were targeting was already getting used to their teamwork. He smiled, a bony barbed spike extended out of his side, impaling one right through the torso and pushing it back. At the same time, another spike extended from his forehead, going straight for the other. The bladed fly soldier winced for a moment before throwing itself to the side, attempting to avoid the spike. Unfortunately, Mahito's control had already been improving in real time. That spike immediately became sharpened and turned into a whip. With a single snap, the fly soldier's head flew off, and the soldier seemed to burst to pieces, as some of the souls holding it together fell apart. After that, it was over. Mahito cracked his neck as her looked all around him. The injured or downed bodies of at least 10 fly soldiers were scattered all over the place. Mahito sighed as he rolled his shoulder. He didn't feel sore, he didn't feel tired, but his instincts told him he needed some rest. He had created many fly soldiers for the sole purpose of training and sparring for the past week. Their cursed energy made them feel like third-grade curses, but their actual strength, Mahito judged to be higher than that of the vast majority of Kyoto students. Aside from Aoi Todo and Mekamaru, of course. It was not a high bar to set by any means, but that likely meant their fighting strength hovered around grade 2 sorcerers. In a group of 10, they seemed capable enough to hold off a weaker grade 1 sorcerer. Mahito himself had only used his ability to alter his own body while fighting, using minimal cursed energy. What remained of the fly soldiers were already on the verge of death, but the special grade curse had learned quite a lot. Special grade curses have a scary amount of cursed energy. And that translates almost one-to-one with stamina. He felt as if he couldn't get tired, as he had pushed the fly soldiers in front of him to the brink of death for hours. A whole day of fighting, honing his skills, and now he felt quite a bit more confident. He had engaged in some hand-to-hand exchanges as well, but the most versatile method he had was to alter his own body as he pleased during the battle. His previously learned martial arts were easy to implement now that he had that much control over his body, and incorporating the occasional axe hand or hammer and spike in his movements completely morphed his fighting style. He no longer felt as if he were fighting like a human. And all it took was an additional week of practice. searching for fly heads, combining them into fly soldiers, fighting said soldiers every night. He needed no sleep, so it felt as if he had twice as much time. He had always been adaptable, but this was something else entirely. It may be a part of my technique. Idle transfiguration allows one to be anything and everything they want. I can freely manipulate myself as well as everyone around me. Maybe it also affects my mentality, making it more flexible. His overall talent felt enhanced. It felt as if he could see no end to his fast growth. He reckoned that he would already be able to easily take care of Itadori Yuji and Kento Nanami as they were during their first encounter with the original infant Mahito. But I shouldn't assume that things will proceed the same. Kenjaku's plan somewhat hinged on idle transfiguration. Things can proceed differently now that he doesn't have that in his hands. On one hand, Mahito doubted that Kenjaku lacked some sort of plan B or C. At the end of the day, having his entire plan rely on the birth of a curse with a suitable curse technique was strange. On the other hand, he had stolen Suguru Geto's body for a reason. The cursed spirit manipulation technique was just as versatile and powerful as the 10 shadows, maybe even more so. He likely has different ways of enacting his plans. Since Sukuna's vessel, Itadori Yuji, has already appeared, things are already on track. Regardless, Mahito felt confident. And why exactly? At this moment, I am the personification of talent. 1 second domain that Gojo had done, and that Mahito had replicated. He had many examples of how the top tiers of that world fought, and he was going to use them all to his advantage. The problem was that he had no idea how quickly things could progress, so he had to train even harder. So, he set his sights on his next quest. I need to land a black flash. Mahito panted, staring at his fist. A purplish energy cloaked it, radiating pure malice. It looked eerie, unnerving. Even to him, it felt unclean. His cursed energy carried a weight to it, like oil-slicked smoke. Dark, suffocating, thick with resentment. It clung to him. Burned cold in his fingertips. And yet, it was strong. Inhumanly so. His special grade body was already monstrous. Swifter, tougher, sharper than any human. But with cursed energy coursing through him, he moved like a predator unchained. Still. The fabled black flash continued to mock him. Always out of reach. Always almost. No matter how many times he punched or kicked, no matter how precisely he timed the moment of impact, nothing. Just regular destruction. He'd meditated until his limbs went numb. Shattered enough sewer walls to collapse entire tunnels. Still nothing. No spark. No crackle in space. No distortion. Just bruised fists and jagged breath. All around him, the remnants of his frustration. Broken walls, collapsed ceilings, cracked stone. Air so thick with dust it felt like breathing through ash. If I linger too long here, someone will notice. And that would be a problem. The jujitsu sorcerers had already begun to stir. Odd cursed energy patterns in the sewers. Collapsing infrastructure. Traces left behind by a very active special grade. Mahito was learning to cover his tracks. Suppress his presence, contain his energy, slither through the veins of the city like a ghost. And slither he did. Without hesitation, his body compressed, condensed, and twisted inward. Bones reshaped, flesh slid like liquid. In a blink, the humanoid form was gone. What remained was a pale white snake, skin stitched together like patchwork fabric. No eyes. No tongue. Just muscle and malice. At the top of his skull, a drill spun lazily, and with a screech of shifting stone, he burrowed into the earth below. Mobility. stealth, versatility. He was becoming a better weapon with every passing day. Still, the black flash eluded him. Mahito, the infant, managed to pull it off within months of being born, during a chaotic fight no less. What am I missing? The thought lingered. Experience? Timing? Understanding? Something about the black flash wasn't just technical. It required presence. Flow. A perfect marriage of intent and instinct. And Mahito, had been a planner all his life. Methodical. Controlled. Even in death, that hadn't changed. But the black flash, that required surrender. He wasn't quite ready to give that yet. I need to land it before I ever meet Sukuna's vessel. A lofty goal, especially considering where the world was headed. He had already been paid a visit by Kenjaku once. A casual drop-in during one of his late-night training sessions. Thankfully, the ancient sorcerer hadn't witnessed the more delicate aspects of Mahito's soul manipulation. Just enough to keep his interest lukewarm. Good. Too much curiosity from Kenjaku was a dangerous thing. Mahito's training came to a halt when he felt the air shift. That pressure again. It crept up his spine like a hand made of smoke. Old, suffocating, expectant. A faint hum filled the tunnel. Mahito's snake form paused mid-burrow. The drill stopped spinning. He twisted upward, flesh peeling back and reforming, twisting into humanoid shape in seconds. He emerged from the wall just in time to see the shimmer of a veil dissolve. A subtle distortion in the sewer's low light. And from it, the familiar silhouette stepped forward. Long black hair. Gold monk's robes over a dark yukata. Calm expression. Stitched forehead. Kenjaku. Ah, there you are, the ancient sorcerer's voice was warm. Playful. Too warm. Too playful. He always sounded like a teacher about to assign homework that might kill you. Mahito didn't respond. He simply tilted his head, feigning ignorance. His eyes widened slightly. His mouth parted in a silent "oh." The act of an infantile curse caught mid-meditation. Kenjaku smiled. You've been busy. The residuals of your training are hard to miss, you know. Mahito bowed his head. Try, strong. You're certainly trying, Kenjaku chuckled. But now I have a little errand for you. Something far more important than punching walls. The ancient sorcerer stepped closer, hands behind his back, his smile never leaving his face. A new player has entered the board. A vessel. Or Sukuna. Mahito's fingers twitched slightly at the name. But his face stayed blank. Sukuna, he asked, dragging the syllables slowly. Kenjaku's eyes twinkled. Yes. Ryaman Sukuna. The king of curses. He's, well, incomplete at the moment. But he's stirring. And his current host is something of a curiosity. The old monster pulled something from his long sleeve, a photograph, slightly crumpled. He tossed it forward. Mahito caught it mid-air. A teenage boy stared back at him. Wide eyes. Messy hair. Slightly confused smile. Innocent, in that irritatingly hopeful way. Yuji Itadori. Mahito narrowed his eyes for a moment. This was it. The start of the real game. I want you to observe him, Kenjaku said casually. Engage if you like, but don't overplay your hand. Just, see what kind of soul he has. Report back. Mahito looked up, meeting those deep violet eyes. He nodded once. See soul. Learn. Good boy, Kenjaku grinned. And just like that, he turned and began to walk away, his presence fading like fog in the wind. Mahito stood still, fingers still clutching the photo. Yuji Itadori. The beginning of everything. He stared at the boy's face for a long moment. A part of him, buried beneath layers of stitched flesh and cursed instincts, felt a spark of something. Not recognition. Not sympathy. Just anticipation. The vessel of Sukuna. A boy born with little cursed energy under suspicious circumstances. Who had eaten one of the most powerful curses in existence. And lived. Mahito tucked the photo into his chest, letting it dissolve into his skin. He glanced at his hand again, still wrapped in that eerie, crackling aura of cursed energy. He smirked. Black flash, or not, he whispered, it's time to meet the future king. Mahito sauntered through the streets with a hint of frustration in his step. His pace was casual, but the slight tension in his shoulders gave him away. He couldn't help but scowl at how Kenjaku had interrupted his training. The timing, the expression on his face, the too casual request. It all left a sour taste in Mahito's mouth. Even worse, the ancient sorcerer seemed to be onto him. Not fully, not enough to act, but perceptive enough to make Mahito second-guess every word, every action. That was what made Kenjaku dangerous. He wasn't used to being deceived. He was used to being the deceiver. Still, Mahito took some comfort in the fact that he had managed to keep what mattered hidden. Kenjaku hadn't seen his soul manipulation in action, hadn't gotten a taste of the full extent of his idol transfiguration. That was enough. For now. Mahito's purple eyes scanned the streets slowly. Shibuya wasn't as loud as it would be later in the story, but it was still a busy place. Crowds moved with absent-minded rhythm, their emotions a dull background hum of anxiety, stress, and irritation. All of it fed him in small ways. Not enough to grow, but enough to keep a smile on his face. He turned a corner, towards a more deserted alleyway, and immediately caught sight of something unusual. Two people, walking side by side. One of them wore a tan overcoat over a fitted black suit. Blonde, slicked hair. Tall, broad frame. Tired posture. His cursed energy was calm, stable, like a sharpened blade sheathed in leather. Kento Nanami. The man looked the same as Mahito remembered. Calm. Controlled. Worn. He radiated the exact energy of someone who hated his job and still did it perfectly. Next to him was the opposite. Itadori Yuji. The boy walked with a spring in his step, still too loud for a patrol, still too excited to be doing something dangerous. His cursed energy was unrefined, but vast. It felt raw, like a blade being swung before the metal had cooled. And there it was. Mahito stopped walking. His eyes met Yuji's across the street for a split second. No recognition on the boy's face. Of course not. He didn't know what Mahito looked like. Not yet. But Mahito could feel it. That soul. It buzzed beneath the skin, restless, almost sentient in how it coiled and shifted. It was not just Yuji's. Sukuna lingered inside, like a beast sleeping in the passenger seat. There it is. That's what Kenjaku wanted me to see. Mahito smiled to himself. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. He stepped into the street without hesitation. Yuji blinked and tilted his head slightly. Nanami stopped walking. The salaryman narrowed his eyes. He saw it. Or rather, felt it. The cursed energy that rolled off of Mahito. Yuji. Step back. Mahito's smile widened. Hello. Yuji blinked again. Hey? Are you a sorcerer or something? Mahito tilted his head. Maybe you could say that, yes. Nanami's hand was already drifting to the hilt of his blade. Your cursed energy is unnatural. You're not human, are you? Mahito sighed. Do I look human? The shape of his body shimmered slightly. His hand rippled and twisted into the shape of a claw, then back into a hand, smooth and seamless. Nanami didn't wait. In an instant, the salaryman dashed forward. His movement was clean. Precise. His cursed energy flared just as his blade came down toward Mahito's shoulder. Mahito didn't block. His body shifted. The blade passed through as his torso warped, bending unnaturally to avoid the cut. He sidestepped, then spun, his arm stretching unnaturally as it turned into a long spike. He aimed it just beside Nanami's face, missing by less than a hair. A warning. Yuji yelled something. Probably an attack call. Mahito didn't flinch as the boy closed the distance in a flash. His cursed energy exploded forward as his fist rocketed toward Mahito's midsection. A solid punch. Not refined, but powerful. Mahito allowed the hit to land. His stomach compressed with the impact, the flesh folding like soft clay against Yuji's rather absurd strength. For the first time in his second life, he could feel some pain. It was minimal, not enough to bother him, but it reminded him that he was alive at least. He smiled, even as his body flew back a few meters, landing in a crouch. Nice. Good punch, he said, shaking his arm out. You're not bad. Yuji's eyes widened slightly. Why did you just let me hit you? His strangely innocent face scrunched up in discomfort as he stepped back slightly. Mahito stood up straight. His smile stayed. This version of Yuji has yet to witness how disturbing curses can be, huh? I guess I was supposed to be the one to teach him that. Not that I care. I wanted to feel it in person. Your soul. It's interesting. Nanami moved again, fast. But this time, Mahito raised a single hand. Enough. I'm not here to fight. If I were, you would certainly know it. Nanami didn't halt, but Yuji did. He put a hand on his mentor's shoulder, stopping him in his tracks. Wait. Something's off. But Mahito was not paying any attention to their increasing wariness. Instead, he was focused inwards. Mahito could feel Sukuna stirring now. Not fully awake, but annoyed. The kind of curses did not enjoy having his vessel's soul observed. Mahito grinned. Relax. I'm just a curious spirit. I like people like you, Itadori Yuji. The boy narrowed his eyes. How do you know my name? I do my homework. Nanami wasn't convinced. His cursed energy was flaring. It was almost time for him to clock out, which meant that he was close to powering up too. Not that it would do him any good. Mahito kept his distance. If I wanted a fight, I'd have taken Nanami's arm off when he swung. If I wanted you dead, Itadori, you'd be bleeding already. But I don't. He gestured to the boy. You're fascinating. A vessel that can both absorb Sukuna's fingers and trap his soul within its own. How can I not be fascinated? Yuji looked more confused than anything now. Mahito took a step back. I'll be seeing you again. Maybe next time, we can have a real conversation. He waved lazily and then stepped into a shadowed alley. His body melted, folding into itself, slipping beneath the ground like water down a drain. Yuji took a step forward. Should we go after him? Nanami shook his head. No. We barely have any information about his technique, it's too risky. Yuji looked down the alleyway, then clenched his fists. I don't like him. Nanami didn't respond at first. Then, quietly, "I don't either." Yuji exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders refusing to leave. His gaze lingered on the place where the curse had vanished, slipped like liquid into a sewage drain. What was that guy? Nanami adjusted his tie. His expression remained unreadable, but his grip on the hilt of his blade stayed just a bit too tight. "A special grade," he said simply. Yuji turned to him, confused. "You sure?" Nanami nodded once. "But not any known special grade." He glanced toward the cracked pavement, the lingering traces of cursed energy still sour in the air. "He didn't fight like the others. He didn't kill on sight. He spoke. He seems to have an agenda, too. It's similar to the one reported earlier." Nanami's voice grew quieter, colder. "We need to inform Gojo." Mahito exhaled as he reformed himself underneath the streets, back in a place more familiar to him, the sewers. His body rippled back into shape without effort, each muscle and fiber slotting together like clay finding form. The chill of the underground air settled over him, thick with damp rot and silence. It was unpleasant. But it was also his. He had spent more time here than anywhere else. Who could blame him? Being above felt strange. Too open. Too clean. The world of humans buzzed with noise and motion, but it was a world he couldn't be part of. Not really. The negative energy that rolled off others gave him momentary warmth. A hit of something familiar. Resentment. Bitterness. Fear. It made his skin hum. But no one looked at him. No one saw him. No one knew he existed. Only sorcerers or those with potential could see him, and their eyes told him everything. They looked at him the same way people in his last life used to. With suspicion. With calculation. Like he was something to be contained. Mahito scoffed as he walked, his footfalls quiet on the wet concrete. Even now, it was the same. A different world, a different body, but the same feeling. Out of place. In his past life, it had been different. He could lie. Smile. Pretend. And it worked. He could blend in with society as long as he wore the right suit and said the right things. But here, in this world of curses and sorcerers, there was no pretending. His body screamed what he was. A monster. A thing born of fear. And maybe that was fitting. He was never meant to be part of their world anyway. Mahito sighed as he leaned against the curved wall of the sewer, his fingers idly tracing the damp stone beside him. That could have gone better. He had met Itadori Yuji. The vessel. The boy with two souls. And somehow, he had failed to leave a proper impression. He hadn't expected to be welcomed. But he had hoped for something different. Some kind of reaction from the boy. Instead, all he got was caution. Even that dull annoyance from Sukuna didn't mean much. The king of curses wasn't easily impressed. Still, it was useful. The first interaction always was. The seed was planted. Mahito closed his eyes. He didn't need acceptance. Just curiosity. Curiosity could grow into doubt. Doubt could be twisted. That's all he needed. Next time, it'll be different. Far above the sewers, beneath the fading light of early evening, two figures stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. The sky had taken on that strange grayish-orange hue unique to Tokyo dusk, where the light clung to the haze for a few final moments before being swallowed by neon and shadows. The quiet hum of traffic below blended with the rustle of wind through electric cables. The air was calm, but the tension wasn't. Nanami stood near the edge, arms crossed, posture rigid. His expression stayed even, but the weight behind his silence told more than any words could. Gojo stood a few steps back, hands in his pockets, blindfold drawn across his eyes, a faint smirk on his lips that didn't quite reach the rest of his face. "So," Gojo said, voice casual. "You're saying there's another one?" "Yes." "Special grade?" "Without a doubt. That amount of cursed energy is unmistakable. It wasn't making any efforts to hide it." Gojo tilted his head. "Like the others?" "No. Not like the one with the volcano-shaped head from your reports." Gojo hummed, lips twitching. He didn't attack. Only defended. Reshaped his own body. Absorbed damage. Avoided blows. Gojo paused for a second, head tilting slightly. Did he seem aware of Sukuna's vessel? Nanami nodded once. He knew Yuji's name. Spoke to him directly. Observed him. Like he was testing something. Gojo's expression didn't change, but the space around him seemed to grow quieter. "And what's your read?" "He's not like the others. He wasn't sent in to cause destruction. He's feeling things out. I don't trust anything he said about not meaning harm." Gojo gave a faint chuckle. "That makes two of us." Nanami adjusted his glasses, the light briefly catching on the lens. "We still don't know what his technique is, or even his name. But his cursed energy felt familiar in the worst way." Gojo turned his head back toward the skyline, eyes hidden beneath cloth and a light-hearted expression. "So that makes three now," he said, voice quieter than usual. "All undocumented. All special grades. And all circling the Sukuna's vessel in one way or another." Nanami nodded. "It's not a coincidence. You still want Yuji on patrol? He needs experience. And if this one's watching him, better we know than don't." Gojo cracked his neck, a small, idle motion, but one that betrayed something lingering underneath. The wind shifted slightly, tugging at the hem of his long black coat. He didn't react. His posture remained loose, relaxed. But Nanami could see it. The tightness in his jaw. The slight adjustment in how his foot angled on the rooftop. Small things. Easy to miss. "I thought you were supposed to be away on a mission around this time," Nanami said, eyes narrowed. "That's true. The higher-ups were quite adamant about this one." Gojo stretched a bit as he spoke, urgency completely lacking in his tone. Nanami glanced toward him. "Then why are you still in the city?" Gojo smiled. The kind of smile that meant trouble for someone. "You're not the only one who got a bad feeling, Nanami." Nanami said nothing. Gojo's presence was always requested in many places, yet he hadn't left the region. It wasn't like this was the first time he was disregarding orders, but this one felt different. Something about this feels off, too much action with special grades popping up out of nowhere. Gojo continued. "This one's also not causing trouble like the others, or seeking me out foolishly. He's patient. He was normally the most carefree person in the world, yet even he could show worry. Not for himself, of course, but for Yuji's safety. He had already taken it upon himself to shelter the boy, and he took that task seriously. The strongest sorcerer wanted Yuji to grow, but not to face impossible odds from the get-go. Patience is dangerous, Nanami said, tone low. Exactly. Gojo smiled widely, still carefree despite the situation. For a few seconds, the rooftop was silent again. Then Gojo turned his head slightly, just enough for Nanami to hear. That curse will come back. Friendly or not, it's bound to show up again. Then we'll be ready. Gojo grinned. That slow, easy grin that always came right before something important happened. I look forward to meeting him. Mahito didn't notice the shift at first. One moment, he was walking the sewers. The same familiar scent of rot and rust. The stale breath of something forgotten by the city above. He had just been heading to his usual hideout, somewhere deeper within the sewers, but not that far away. He was just slowly moving, letting the silence wash over him. Then it changed. No warning. No ripple. Just a step, and sunlight. The air warmed around him, soft wind brushing across his skin like fingers. Beneath his feet, the grit of dirty concrete was gone, replaced by the give of sand. His toes sank in slightly, the grains hot, fine, and dry. He stopped walking. Slowly, he looked up. The tunnel had disappeared. He now stood on the edge of a perfect tropical island, right on the beach sands. Sunlight poured down from a sky too blue to be real. Palm trees swayed gently at the edges of the shoreline. Waves rolled in slow, glassy arcs, washing against the sand with a sound too calm to be natural. It wasn't real. It was designed. Mahito's eyes narrowed. A domain. Dagon's domain at that. But it wasn't just that, he would have noticed it ahead of time if it had been. The domain's barrier was also engulfed in something else, another sort of force field that hid it. Mahito recognized the work immediately. Clean seams. No spiritual turbulence. The barrier was perfect. Kenjaku. He turned his head, and sure enough, found the ancient sorcerer lounging beneath the shade of a tree that didn't quite cast shadows the way it should. Kenjaku sat on a smooth, moss-covered rock, arms loosely crossed behind his head, one leg bent casually over the other. His smile was wide, as always, and still didn't mean anything good. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, not bothering to rise. Dagon's technique has a certain charm to it. Mahito didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, let his expression slacken just slightly. Kenjaku didn't seem to mind it. "I thought you might appreciate a change of scenery," he continued. "The sewers can't be good for your posture." Mahito blinked slowly. "Where, here?" Kenjaku sat up a little straighter. "For you? Treat this as a training space. Controlled. Private. I want to test something." Mahito rocked on his heels. "You, testin' me?" Kenjaku gave a light chuckle. "I've been thinking about your technique. Its potential. You've shown ingenuity in how you use it, which I appreciate. But I'd like to see more. Something closer to your limit." Mahito scratched his chin with a curled finger. "Wanna see how I break things?" He kept his childish facade, smiling innocently as he spoke. Kenjaku smiled wider. "No. I want to see how you grow." From the water's edge, two other figures began to emerge. Dagon floated half-submerged in the surf, still in cursed womb form, breathing quietly and watching with his beady eyes. But it was the figure walking across the beach that held Mahito's attention. Hanami. She moved like the tide. Silent. Purposeful. The sand didn't slow her. Her body was tall and covered in tan bark-like flesh, black lines etched across her entire form like cracked stone. Where her eyes should have been, she had branching wooden tendrils. Her mouth was exposed, with inhumanly perfect teeth shining in the sunlight. Her expression was unreadable, locked in place like a statue carved in irritation. Two jagged black lines ran down the front of her face like lightning scars. A large, blooming flower rested on her left shoulder, its petals slightly quivering in the breeze. Her left arm, covered by a white cloth, ended in black bark with bone-white fingers, while her right hand was bare, with black fingers on tan bark. She wore loose, black pants tied at the waist with a white sash. Her posture was relaxed, but her cursed energy was buried deep. Rooted. Steady. I volunteered her, since Jogo is still out of commission. Kenjaku said casually. Hanami didn't speak. Think of it as a spar. No killing. No domains. No audience, aside from us, of course. Mahito glanced at the short table resting beside the tree. Jogo's head was neatly placed upon it, still severed. He was recovering, gathering cursed energy to heal himself fully in one go. For now, the volcanic curse was quiet, one eye half open, watching. Dagon gurgled softly. Kenjaku raised an eyebrow. I also wanted to ask you something, he added. About your last encounter. Mahito didn't speak. With Sukuna's vessel. There was a pause. Then Mahito shrugged. Sukuna, no care. No, fun. Yuji? Mahito's mouth twitched. Weak. Maybe, potential. Kenjaku's eyes lit faintly. I look forward to seeing what you steer him towards. Mahito said nothing. Kenjaku raised a hand lazily. Go on then. Show us something. Mahito turned and walked forward. The sand shifted under his feet, warm and fine. The sun beat down above, but it felt wrong. The wind brushed past, but never quite touched him. It was all too perfect. He stopped 10 meters from Hanami. She tilted her head once, slightly. Mahito's skin rippled. His shoulders loosened. Flesh beneath the surface began to shift. His smile vanished. Mahito took a slow breath. The sand was still beneath his feet. The air was still warm. Nothing changed on the surface. But the ground twitched. He felt the vibrations within the sand, his enhanced senses tuned to his surroundings perfectly. Roots exploded from the sand. They came fast and narrow at first, fewer in number, sharper, more precise. Mahito ducked and twisted, letting his ribs slide apart as one root grazed through the empty space in his chest. He rolled forward, spine bending sideways as another whipped over his shoulder. He sprang up low, letting a blade form at his wrist, and slashed through a root trying to wrap around his leg. It vanished instantly. Not torn. Not destroyed. Unmade. Illusions, turned real. But still cursed constructs. Not actual wood. It was just like he remembered them, it just felt odd seeing them in person. More roots burst out of the sand, blowing up a cloud of dust. The roots were slower and thicker. There were dozens. A full wave blooming out of the dunes. Hanami was sacrificing speed for area control. Trying to pin him. Crush him under the weight of those roots. Mahito let his body flatten like a sheet of paper, easily slipping in between the roots as he then snapped out his arms, turning them into long whips. He spun, twisting like a drill, carving through roots and clearing space around him. The moment his feet touched sand, he reshaped and leapt, arms splitting into wings mid-air. He immediately took flight, trying to get a better, bird's-eye view of the battlefield. But when looking at the vanishing cloud of dust, he saw nothing other than sand and broken roots. He immediately turned around, looking into and searching the sky. He caught a glimpse of Hanami, drifting above the battlefield. Held aloft by a single larger wooden ball, floating in midair right underneath the sun, making it difficult for Mahito to stare at her. Then came more wooden balls. Small orbs the size of melons, floating behind her, forming in a ring. One launched. Then another. They moved fast, faster than Mahito remembered them being. Each sprouting sharp branches mid-flight like javelins. The first missed him by centimeters. The second grazed his side and disintegrated. Mahito grunted. He felt the dull pain, despite not actually receiving any injuries. His soul was safe, but his body was being battered. The third hit his arm. The branch pierced straight through. It also managed to break his wings and destabilize his flight. Yet, he still clung to the air. He looked down at the damage. The ball that had just passed through him burst into fragments a second later, causing countless little wooden tendrils to explode outwards and pierce his body further. He finally dropped, his wings carrying his broken form no longer. Mahito hit the sand hard, and another cloud of dust formed. He rolled. Came up on one knee, already reshaping his badly damaged body into a more human form. Despite the pain he felt, Mahito still hadn't been injured. Hanami dropped with him, silent and still composed. She feels a lot stronger in person than in the show. Mahito couldn't help but smile inwardly. He was having fun. And the fun was only intensifying as he prepared to stand up. How fun. I knew I needed experience fighting against strong curses, but who knew I'd enjoy it so much? Mahito stood slowly, shaking his arm out and patting the dust off of him while wooden splinters were expelled out of his body. Hurts, lots. Hanami didn't answer. The air pulsed. A massive flower bloomed behind her. It cracked open, massive petals unfurling. Cursed buds shot out in a wide arc, whistling like needles through the air. Mahito cursed under his breath and moved, quickly turning his body into a liquid-like state, hoping for the buds to pass through him. But unlike Toto in the show, he didn't have the option of not using cursed energy at all. His entire body was made out of cursed energy. So the buds were easily a hard counter to him. Or they would have been if they could damage his soul. One clipped his shoulder. Another grazed his back. One was embedded in his leg. He could feel it immediately. The roots spreading through his body, feeding. Leeching. Not just draining cursed energy, but reacting to it. Trying to twist deeper inside, even as he stood still. This is quite annoying. As a cursed spirit, I have limited options when fighting this technique. He didn't run. In the first place, that was not an option. Instead, he closed his eyes. His entire body shifted into a bulbous mess as he immediately manipulated his soul. He moved all of the buds within one part of his body, his arm. And, in that very moment, he split that piece of his soul and threw it towards Hanami, who immediately raised roots from the sand and formed a shield in front of her. The bulbous and fleshy arm seemed to collapse inward. The flesh darkened, peeled, and melted away like bark in fire. Then immediately burst into many blade-shaped bone fragments, all headed towards the root-controlling cursed spirit. Hanami's eyes narrowed behind the branches covering her face. The shield in front of her had withstood the onslaught, but it had turned into a pincushion. Mahito's body reformed a moment later, seamless, as if nothing had ever happened. Yet he had finally sustained an injury, albeit self-inflicted. Thankfully, the loss of an arm meant nothing to a special-grade curse. It recovered as quickly as it went. Kenjaku made a sound from under the tree. A hint of a smirk lingered on his face. Amused. Mahito stood again. Breathing slower now. He flexed his fingers. Then the flowers bloomed. A wide circle of soft, delicate petals spiraled out from Hanami's feet, covering the sand like a blanket. Mahito smelled it before he felt it. The scent was sweet. Comforting. The effect was worse. His limbs slackened. His vision blurred at the edges. His heartbeat slowed. The desire to fight vanished. Forcefully. Just like that. But to take away the hatred and desire for battle from a cursed spirit was more than just a parlor trick. It was like taking away a facet of one's soul. Mahito stumbled forward, eyes half-lidded. This one's trickier than it looks. He forced his heel into the sand. Twisted it. Drove pain back into his system. It wasn't quick enough. Hanami raised one hand, wooden balls forming again behind her. Mahito let himself fall sideways. A branch pierced the space where his heart had been a second earlier. Not that he needed to dodge it, but it was better to continue obscuring the extent of his abilities for now. He laughed. Slurred and soft, his voice came out in a rather infantile way. Clever, flower, lady. He lay still for a moment. Then his skin peeled off. The entire outer layer of his torso shed like a husk, sliding into the sand. A new layer grew in, less refined, more stitches layered across his skin. But he was now awake and in control. He surged forward again, dragging a whip arm across the beach, sweeping buds out of the air and ripping apart roots that had grown to try and pierce him. But his target was clear. He wanted to reach her. To harm her directly. Hanami met him mid-charge, but she was surprisingly sluggish. Slower than Mahito had expected at such close range. Roots tried to block and skewer him, but he had already gotten used to them. His left arm split into 5 blades, each one jagged and twitching, revolving. He swiped once. All of the roots were splintered and ruined as if destroyed by a chainsaw on a whip. The second swipe connected. It hit her shoulder. In an instant, Hanami grunted loudly, brought to one knee as the revolving blade still moved to cut deeper and deeper into her. One of her arms moved up, trying to catch a hold of that blade, to stop it. Meanwhile, the other moving blades all came towards Hanami's body from different directions, forcing her to raise a cocoon of roots around her. It was built of many smaller roots, layered, more durable. But it was only a matter of time before Mahito's makeshift chainsaw whips got through them. He would have continued, but then he heard a clap, and his entire body stood still, chainsaws stopping in an instant just before they tore into Hanami further. He had caused damage, plenty of it. And it seemed to be enough for Kenjaku to end the round. Hanami grunted a bit as Mahito's now still blade pulled away from her shoulder. She then lowered her arm, slowly standing back up, the cuts already healing. Mahito stood in front of her, making his chest heave softly, then turned to face the shade again. Kenjaku was still standing there, leaning on that tree, his thoughts difficult to read. Jogo's head still stood silently beside him, though his one eye was now fully open, and full of discernible awe. Dagon bobbed further back, watching with vague interest. To think he can already stand up to Hanami. How fast is he growing? Jogo blinked a few times as he looked at the altercation. Sure, Mahito appeared tired, but Jogo could tell from his cursed energy that he could keep going, for a long time at that, too. Meanwhile, Hanami had used quite a bit of energy, though not to the point where she could be called tired. It was still more significant. And she was on the verge of receiving a very heavy injury when the fight stopped. The curse that held the advantage in that battle was Mahito, despite technically taking more damage. Mahito didn't speak. Neither did Kenjaku nor Jogo. For a few seconds, the only sound was the gentle loop of the fake ocean behind them. Then Kenjaku stood. I saw what I needed. Mahito turned his head slightly, one eye narrowed. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Soft. Almost childish. Not enough to show satisfaction. Just enough to say, "You saw what I wanted you to see." As the battle ended, the waves receded, and the shores calmed down. Kenjaku remained beneath the tree long after the fake ocean had stilled. Dagon floated quietly in the background, barely rippling the surface of the domain. Hanami stood at a distance, arms folded, her shoulder already healed. She was, at the end of the day, the most durable among the disaster curses. Jogo's head remained unmoving, his eyes studying Mahito with great interest and glee. It's only natural that one of us, new humans, has this much talent. Kenjaku watched Mahito as the younger curse walked away without a word. Still wearing that childlike smile. Still humming to himself like a creature that had never once questioned its place in the world. But Kenjaku knew better. The infantile curse was growing faster than anticipated. His body was evolving with every encounter, and worse, his soul was keeping pace. Most curses developed their form first. Mahito, however, was layered, curious, reflexive, and dangerously self-aware for something, whilst pretending not to be. Kenjaku lowered his chin, letting his gaze drift toward the messed-up beach that Mahito had left in his wake. He had reshaped himself mid-flight, split a part of his soul, weaponized it, then regenerated without delay or hesitation. That wasn't something one could do with just improvisation. Mahito's technique wasn't just the manipulation of his body. It was something deeper. Something born in the soul. Kenjaku had seen something like it before. Long ago. Before the techniques used in the current era sprouted. It was raw. Unrefined. Dangerous in its purity. A curse that shapes the soul. He whispered it into the quiet, ignoring the reactions of the other curses around him. He had already suspected that Mahito was hiding things from him, but this spar had just managed to confirm that thing for him. Mahito wasn't just modifying his physical body, he was modifying his soul, and his body naturally moved to match the form of the soul. If that were true, then Mahito wasn't just useful. He was pivotal. The future Kenjaku envisioned, a new era of cursed sorcery. But can he manipulate souls other than his? If not, then his ability may just be a similar one. Even so, why hide it from me? But the young curse was hard to read. Too perceptive. Too adaptable. Too clever for his own good. A wild card. Kenjaku smiled again, this time to himself. Let's see. Whether you're a piece on the board, or another player entirely. The ocean shimmered one last time before they escaped Mahito's perception as he stepped out. To him, it felt as if the shores had dissolved entirely. The sewers welcomed him with a familiar stench he hadn't missed. Mahito's footsteps echoed softly on the wet stone. The air was familiar. Heavy. Full of the kind of stagnant energy that only the unloved parts of a city could hold. His body felt lighter than before. Not because he had won. But because he had survived without revealing everything. He hadn't used his most refined tricks. Hadn't manipulated the soul of his enemy or even hinted that he was able to. Kenjaku finding out that Mahito could manipulate his soul was very much within expected parameters. After all, it was easier to fool the ancient sorcerer if he thought that he had Mahito figured out. Mahito was well aware of the ancient sorcerer's suspicions, the body snatcher had made it quite obvious after all. He showed just enough to be impressive. Even so, fooling Kenjaku isn't easy, can't let a small win cloud my judgment going further. Mahito paused in a narrow corridor, light from a broken grate casting silver bars down the walls. He reached for a loose piece of flesh on his arm, plucked a splinter still lodged in his skin, and flicked it into the water. His base wasn't far. A tunnel, a junction, and a half-formed chamber he had been carving slowly over time. It was crude but comfortable. Private. Quiet. Mahito turned a corner. And stopped. There was someone else in the tunnel, a stench he didn't recognize amidst the filth. Two figures, actually. The first was already mid-swing. A glint of steel cut the dim sewer light as a massive battle axe arced toward his head. It came fast. Silent. From above. A vertical cleave with enough force to shatter bone, maybe even completely destroy a lesser curse. But Mahito was still riding the high of technically winning against Hanami. The special grade's body bent backwards in an instant, spine folding like paper at a 90-degree angle. The blade missed his face by a hair's breadth, carving a deep gash into the concrete beneath him with a wet crack. He smiled as the blade passed right over his face. He felt relaxed in that moment, calm, concentrated. The figure that attacked him was a tall woman with silver blue hair tied into a sleek braid. Her curves were sharp beneath a fitted bodysuit, her stance poised and careful. She moved like someone who knew the exact weight of her strikes and didn't plan on striking twice. The second figure, a silver-haired boy in suspenders, had already drawn a warding charm, his body moving with purpose, clearly setting up a barrier. Mahito straightened up, his spine standing back up with a nasty crack as he dusted a fleck of debris from his shoulder. "Well," he said casually. "That's one way to say hello." The woman with the axe stood still now, unmoving. Her braid hung over her shoulder, boots rooted to the stone like she hadn't just tried to decapitate him. Her face was unreadable, but her stance was relaxed. She didn't press the attack. Grade 1 sorcerers, huh? I must have garnered too much attention. Mahito mused, studying her weapon. An independent curse that speaks. That amount of curse energy also sure narrows it down. The boy behind her didn't lower the charm as he made some mental notes about the humanoid curse in front of them. The woman finally spoke. "Confirmed. Target is not a first grade or semi-special grade. Cursed energy density is comparable to known special grades. Unregistered at that." She adjusted her grip slightly. "I am Mei, grade 1 sorcerer. I've been hired to eliminate a threat lurking in these sewers." Her voice was smooth and calm, despite being faced with a special grade curse she knew nothing about. Mahito smiled. "Did the invoice say anything about asking questions first?" Mei raised her chin a fraction. "No." Mahito sighed, rolling his neck lazily. "That's cute but unnecessary. I am not a threat to anyone aside from the structural integrity of some of the streets above me." "Sis, doesn't that still endanger people?" the silver-haired boy asked incredulously. Not with the amount of noise I kept making. Someone was bound to take notice of it." Mahito shrugged a bit, not exactly feeling threatened in the encounter. Sure, Mei was strong, some could say she was stronger than Nanami, if not on par. But none of her abilities could damage his soul. Not that anyone even knew what it took to damage him at that point. Mei didn't lower her axe. Her eyes were still analyzing everything, distance, footing, blind spots. "You're not what we expected," she said calmly. "Most things aren't as expected in this world," Mahito replied. "The important thing is whether you survive the surprise or not. Your cursed energy," she said, "feels even more vile and repulsive than that of the currently registered special grades." Mahito just shrugged, not taking her words as either a compliment or an insult. He was, at the end of the day, a curse. "And you're here for money," he said, walking a slow arc around her, careful not to invade her reach. "That makes you predictable." Ui stiffened slightly, jumping a few steps behind as he continued his skillful preparations to put up a barrier. Mahito stopped, just out of axe range. "Relax," he said. "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't be talking." Mei's expression didn't change. But her stance shifted, just slightly. A soft adjustment. A sign she understood the point. "You won't defend yourself?" she asked. "Oh, I will," Mahito said. "Just not yet. I'm curious. You tried to kill me on entry. That means you didn't know who I was. Mei lowered her weapon to her side, though she didn't sheath it. You're not on any registry, she replied. No known records. The official list of special grades is short. I prefer to stay off lists. Mei's eyes narrowed a fraction. Your name? Mahito. The air between them seemed to still. Even Ui flinched faintly. Humanity's fear of itself. The young special grade smiled a bit as he spoke of his nature, the fear that formed him. Dark purplish cursed energy rolled off of him subconsciously as he mentioned it. Mei murmured. Fitting. Must be why it feels so dirty. Mahito offered no reaction. He just watched her. She watched him back. Then, without saying anything further, she lowered her axe to her side. Her grip didn't loosen, but she no longer looked like she intended to swing again. Since this is a conversation, she said. I remember there being other intelligent special grades. Talking ones. Banding together. Gojo mentioned some. Would you happen to have some information on that? Her eyes shimmered faintly as she studied him. She no longer viewed Mahito just as a threat. In him, she saw something else. Something profitable. Information on unregistered special grades. Can the elders even put a high enough price on it? Mei's axe remained at her side. Not lowered. Not raised. Balanced. She had stopped viewing Mahito as prey, at least for the moment. The curse tilted his head slightly, watching her with a thoughtful expression. I do have information, he said at last. His tone was smooth. Polished. A touch playful. But not for free. That made her smile, faintly. Of course. He'd learned her language in seconds. Well, he already knew who she was and had already worked as a sort of mercenary before. Money was a language that all mercenaries spoke. She should be able to fix any funding issues I may have in the future. And why? She asked. Would I pay for something that could be made up on the spot? Of course, there was always the issue of credibility. One that couldn't ever be easily surpassed. Mahito gave a low chuckle. It echoed off the stone walls, soft and smooth like water sliding over glass. Because money is easier to trust than people and even curses, he replied. And with enough payment, I'd have no reason to lie. He took a step closer, keeping himself just at the edge of reach. Still composed. Still unreadable. You'll be able to verify plenty of what I say about that unregistered volcanic curse with Gojo too. You don't have to make the payment in full right away either. Mahito knew better than anyone else that trust could be earned with time. Besides, he added with a shrug, I doubt you'll be at a loss even if you pay me a pretty sum. I bet the elders would sell their firstborn for some intel right now. Mei's eyes narrowed. Not in suspicion. In consideration. Fine, she said. Start talking. The sun was low above Tokyo Jujutsu High, casting pale yellow beams through a cracked corridor window. Inside a sparse, paper-strewn office, Satoru Gojo spun slowly in a rolling chair, his blindfold tugged halfway up to expose brilliant blue eyes. A file sat on the desk in front of him, freshly opened. Reports lined the margins, handwritten notations in red pen, and a wax seal from Mei's personal signature on the front. Nanami stood nearby, arms folded, a familiar crease between his brows. So, Gojo said between spins, Mei met our mystery sewer rat. Mahito, Nanami replied, tone dry. That's the name he gave. Gojo stopped spinning. He blinked, leaned forward, and propped his chin in one hand. Bit on the nose, don't you think? She also said he talks like a salesman, Nanami added. Smart. Polite. Knows how to make a deal with people. Gojo flipped to the second page of the file. He gave her the technique breakdown of the volcanic curse you fought, his name as well. Jogo. Specialized in speed amongst his peers, it seems, quite fragile otherwise, at least for a special grade curse. Nanami scowled a bit as he read through the reports. He was very much interested in the recent appearance of special grade curses. He knew that many of the people he knew and cared about could be in danger because of them. I could tell as much. He was still weak, though Gojo was less worried. His absolute strength provided him with assurance in all situations. It's safe to assume the information is accurate then. Same with the special grade that rescued Jogo, named Hanami. Nanami slowly read over the report, before Gojo snatched it from him with a smile. Ho, interesting. Cursed buds that can leech off of cursed energy, a flower field that takes away one's desire to fight momentarily, masterful area control using roots, every small detail, even confirmation that both curses possess a domain. Nanami tilted his head slightly. Did she believe him? Gojo smirked. She paid him. She's also paying me a bit to verify the information on Jogo. I believe she'll juice out a lot from the elders for this. Nanami raised a brow. How much? Enough to buy a city. At least special grades moving about and scheming is something they would be desperate to know and keep in check. Gojo leaned back, resting his boots on the edge of the desk. She says he appears trustworthy to her. I cross-referenced it with my own first-hand experience, seems pretty legit. Techniques were described with the kind of clarity you can only get if you were there. Then the bigger question is why, Nanami said. Why sell us this information? Because, Gojo said, grinning beneath his blindfold, he's trying to look trustworthy. Ulterior motives, huh? The salaryman readjusted his round glasses with a sigh. Of course he does. He's not a blessing. He's a curse. Gojo tapped the file. He's clever. You can feel it in the report. He even managed to gain Mei Mei's trust, something which can only be bought with lots of money usually. It isn't just that he wants to talk. He enjoys talking, he's good at it. Nanami nodded slowly. Then he's not like Jogo or Hanami. Not part of their organization in spirit. No, Gojo said. Doesn't seem like it. He tossed the file onto the desk and stretched his arms overhead. And here's the kicker, Gojo said with a light laugh. He hinted at something strange. Said the curses are being led by a jujitsu sorcerer, one that is, oddly enough, dressed like a monk. Nanami frowned. That. It can't be him, right? I saw him die with my own 2 eyes. But at least we know it for sure. Someone else is pulling the strings, and they have big ambitions. Gojo rose from his chair and paced toward the window. His spiky white hair caught the light, gleaming against the dark collar of his high-collared jacket. He folded his arms behind his head and stared at the horizon out the window. You know what I hate most about people who lie? Nanami didn't answer. Gojo grinned. When they also tell the truth. Nanami stepped forward. Do you want me to track him? Find out more about this mystery monk? Gojo shook his head. No. Not yet. Let Mei Mei handle the next few steps. She's already made contact. No need to rush things. Nanami glanced back at the report. He's trying to insert himself into the system. It won't be long before the elders try to use him. Gojo laughed. Let them try. Maybe this special grade will distract them enough, and they'll annoy me less. Nanami allowed himself the smallest smile. What about the students? Should we warn Yuji? Gojo turned back, smile still lingering. Mahito's already seen him. Didn't strike. Didn't pursue. Which means he likely doesn't want to fight or capture him. He would have done that back then if he truly wanted to. That still means his intentions are unknown. That in itself can be dangerous. Gojo tapped his temple lightly. But we'll keep watching. I want to meet him myself. Nanami raised an eyebrow. You want to meet a curse? Not instantly exorcise it? Gojo walked past, grabbing the report with one hand and slipping it into his jacket. He talks like a person. He pushed open the office door, stepping into the hall. I want to see how human he is. He paused at the threshold and glanced back over his shoulder, that familiar confident grin sliding across his face. And who knows, he said. Maybe I'll get myself a new ally. Mei had dealt with all kinds of curses. Loud ones. Stupid ones. Vile, hungry ones. But this one, this Mahito, was something else entirely. He didn't just speak fluently. He knew how to negotiate. How to dress lies in curiosity. How to pretend to be small when he clearly wasn't. She walked through the dim tunnels with Ui in tow, her axe slung casually over one shoulder. Her boots didn't splash. She moved like someone who'd already memorized the terrain. Ui glanced back occasionally, making sure no remnants of cursed energy lingered. He's dangerous, he said simply. Very. Especially to the Jujitsu Society as a whole, Mei replied, adjusting her braid. But danger wasn't the real problem. There had always been dangerous curses. What set Mahito apart was that he wanted to be something more. Not a destroyer. Not a devourer. Something adjacent to humans. Or maybe something that humans would have to learn to live beside. The elders would never accept something like him. But eventually, they wouldn't have a choice. That kind of ambition was hard to put a price on. And Mei had the pleasure of making contact with Mahito first, and now had the opportunity to profit even more. She had first-hand access to movements among the unregistered special grades, letting her adjust her investments ahead of time. She could also sell that intel further, at a rather high markup as well. She had no doubt the information he gave was real, especially with the way that the curse had haggled the price. As a curse, he can't purchase anything himself. That's part of our deal, my associates and I manage the funds and handle his acquisitions. The special grade had already set himself up to have an ongoing cooperation with her, which was commendable. That's why he only asked for 25% of the profit from the intel sold to the elders. She had haggled him down from 50%, with the agreement that she would assist with managing his money. He might be a curse, but he knows how to invest, and knows not to overplay his hand. He was interesting enough to warrant future cooperation in Mei's eyes. He had the potential to bring her quite a bit of profit. That made him useful. And being useful was the only currency Mei ever cared about. For now, he provides information. Maybe later, he'll even accept missions. Regardless, things were bound to get interesting for Mei. I get the feeling that business will be booming for the next few years. Time passed quietly after that. 1 week. Then 2. Then an entire month. Jujitsu High didn't stir as much as expected. The elders, predictably, wanted to confirm things before panicking. Which meant Gojo was still free to watch from the sidelines, occasionally smirking at mission reports he pretended not to take seriously. Mahito stayed underground. No more surprise meetings. No more polite smiles. Only silence and training. He had grown fond of the lower levels of the sewers, the ones with collapsed tunnels and no active runoff. The air was heavier there. Thicker with old air and thick in cursed energy due to all of the curses he had gathered there. It wasn't just his own efforts now. He had agreed with Mei Mei and her associates. They were to steer as many fly heads as they could find towards the lower sewers where he now dwelled. It was something easy to do, even for the lowest grade sorcerers, which Mei Mei hired using chump change. Since it didn't require Mei Mei's intervention, the matter only cost about 2.5% of his initial contract in the share of information. It was a small price to pay to him. Now he could focus solely on his idol transfiguration, improving it and building his strength. A perfect space and environment to experiment. Abundant in resources. The fly heads were weak. Bottom feeders. Nearly invisible to most sorcerers in terms of threat level. But they were abundant. And Mahito had begun stitching them together once again. Not like a scientist. Like an artist. His newest creations were grotesque little things, clumps of twisted fly head souls melted into patchwork flesh, limbs arranged not for function but for adaptability. Some had too many wings. Others none at all. But they moved. They learned. They were the fly soldiers, Mark II. He no longer bothered to give them a human appearance, discovering that the strain on them was a lot smaller if he just kept their appearance similar to the shapes of the grouped-up fly heads. But he was able to increase their size considerably, making them comparable to a regular human. Meanwhile, their speed had doubled when compared to the Mark I that he had created in the past. Though stronger individually than his previous creation, Mahito was also able to make a whole lot more of them. Each one carried the cursed energy of a second grade, but their coordination and speed made them more dangerous than the classification implied, maybe even rivaling Nanami or Mei Mei in burst movement. They were, unfortunately, nowhere near as durable as a grade 1 sorcerer and had no curse technique. They just had strength and limbs created purely for combat. To make up for that, Mahito had given them crude self-destruction triggers. If overwhelmed, they would collapse in on themselves and scatter shards of cursed bones, a final bite from a dying fawn. Mahito sat cross-legged in a crooked chamber lit only by the faint glow of residual cursed energy. 20 fly soldiers populated the entire room in front of him, pulsing softly, their bodies held together by solid stitches of cursed energy. My idol transfiguration has improved by leaps and bounds. Let's test their strength a bit. One lunged at the wall, its wings flapping rapidly as they extended and sliced the air in a clean arc. It was a lot more than enough force to kill. The casual slice left a deep gash in the stone. Mahito watched. Evaluated. Then restructured its leg with a twitch of his finger. He could feel it now. The subtle difference between shaping the body and reshaping the soul beneath it. Each time he built a fly soldier, he understood a little more. It's not about control. It's about resonance. If their souls bent just right, their forms followed with less resistance. That meant more complex constructs were possible. Not smarter, perhaps. But more precise. More expressive. He let out a slow breath. In the weeks since the spar with Hanami, something had shifted. It wasn't that he felt stronger. It was that he felt closer. To what, he wasn't sure. Maybe he was closer to landing a black flash. Maybe to the edge of something else. Mahito stood, his form rippling as he let a new limb shape from his back, an elegant wing made from interwoven strands of fly head bone and reinforced sinew. It twitched once, then fell still. He had managed to safely integrate body parts and grow his soul by subduing weaker ones. But it was not stable yet. The parts he absorbed would eventually break away from him. Regardless, he had already found new applications of his curse technique. All that was left was to work on them. His fly soldiers watched. Silent. Waiting. He smiled. Time to take this a bit further. He turned toward the far wall, dragging one long finger down the stone. A crude map formed beneath his touch, outlines of patrol routes he'd memorized, surface exits, places where jujitsu sorcerers moved. His finger paused over one line. Itadori Yuji, still on patrol. Not alone this time, he stands alongside his classmates. Kujisaki Nobara and Fushiguro Megumi. Good, perfect, actually. The three seem to have been sent on a simple mission alone, likely some type of test. His grin widened. Not cruel. Not mocking. Curious. Let's see how far you've grown. Mahito immediately grasped at the air. The creatures he had created buzzed, coming closer to him. He gathered 3 of the fly soldiers, fusing them in a low huddle of curses and bone. The final form was a long-limbed monstrosity. A creature with 6-bladed arms and 9 pairs of eyes. It walked on legs that seemed to belong to an insect, but could also fly with numerous sets of human-sized fly wings. It was strong, a lot stronger than the other fly soldiers he had made. But it was even more durable in body, but fragile in soul. It wouldn't last for too long. The forceful bonds that formed it were unstable. It wouldn't kill Itadori or his classmates. It couldn't. But that wasn't the point. Go, he said, voice low, as he showed the creature a picture of Itadori Yuji. The creature hissed lowly, immediately rushing to leave the sewers, brushing past all of the other fly soldiers that Mahito had created. Mahito leaned back. He called upon all of the other fly soldiers and minimized their forms into finger-sized bits of flesh. Wriggling, still alive. And without hesitation, he formed a pocket within his body and stored them within his stomach. He felt strangely excited. He wanted to see it, just how much he had grown. If Itadori crushed his creation without strain, that would give him confirmation that he was growing nicely. That was a good thing. Yuji was an important centerpiece in his plans. If not, that meant Mahito had already far surpassed his original counterpart even when it came to curse technique manipulation. Either way, it would be useful. And if Sukuna somehow stirred and was brought up, well, that would be even better. A chance to witness the king of curses or the strongest sorcerer of this era in person. That's all I can ask for right now. The forest on the outskirts of Saitama should have been quiet. Instead, the air cracked with the sound of metal slicing through leaves. Yuji's fist collided with the creature's side with full force, but the thing barely staggered. Okay, definitely not your average curse, he muttered, gritting his teeth as he backpedaled. The creature stood tall. Human-sized, but wrong. Long-limbed and angular, with 6-bladed arms and legs like those of a mantis. Its torso pulsed with segmented flesh. Wings twitched at its back. Not 2, but many. Each one full-sized, curved like the wings of a fly and beating with a low, bone-rattling hum. Its 9 eyes blinked out of sync, scattered across a head that didn't resemble any single creature. It looked like it was born specifically for battle, and it certainly moved like it too. Yuji ducked under one blade, blocked a second with his forearm reinforced with cursed energy, and launched a counterstrike into the thing's chest. He could feel bone bend under his knuckles, but not break. Nobara cut across the tree lean, hammer and nails in hand. The creature shifted. It didn't track her. It anticipated. It spun and lashed with one curved arm. The attack nearly cleaved through the air where her torso had been a split second earlier. Nobara rolled and landed in a crouch, already lining up a nail. Its speed's ridiculous, she said. It's watching all of us at once, Megumi replied, keeping his distance. Yuji gritted his teeth. Feels like it's predicting too. Or learning. The creature moved again. A blur in the foliage. Its body slipped through trees like wind. It moved too fast for Megumi or Nobara to follow clearly. Only Yuji could track it, and even then, barely. But it still moved too smoothly for something that looked so jagged. It wasn't just reacting. It was testing them. "Divine dog," Megumi called. The black werewolf-looking Shikigami launched forward, teeth bared. The fly soldier responded mid-motion, three-bladed arms spinning like wheels. Divine dog leapt high, trying to avoid the sweep, but one blade caught its side. It vanished with a crack of energy, Megumi dispelling it before it died. The curse didn't celebrate. It just shifted targets again. Yuji planted his feet and roared, bringing his fist around in a wide arc. The curse was faster than him, but speed was not everything. The curse slid beneath the blow and lashed upward, forcing Yuji back. Another strike came low and fast, aiming for his knee. He barely jumped in time, twisting mid-air to throw a wild kick at its head. It clipped, but didn't faze the creature. Megumi's voice rang out again. "Toad. Now." The Shikigami lashed out its tongue and wrapped it around one of the creature's arms. It resisted with surprising strength, wrenching itself free after only a moment, but it was enough. Yuji crashed in with a divergent fist. The real punch hit hard, with cursed energy echoing behind it. The creature flew back, wings catching air just before it hit the dirt. But it had already been steered in the right direction by the trio. Nobara raised her hand. "Hairpin." Three nails embedded in the ground around it erupted upwards with cursed energy. The blast of the expanding nails sent it spinning. The wings on its left side were shredded in the process. Still, it rose. Its legs twitched. The blades reshaped slightly. Its head turned, slow and deliberate. The creature hissed. Then it began to pulse. Megumi narrowed his eyes. "Get back." Yuji blinked. "Wait, what's it dash?" "Now." They leapt back. The creature's body contracted. Limbs pulled inward. Wings folded tight. Then its chest split. A sound like a bone spike snapping echoed as a dozen needle-like shards burst from its back and scattered in every direction. "Self-destruct?" Nobara asked, shielding herself. "Almost," Megumi muttered. "Some sort of desperate last attack. Burned through a lot of cursed energy, it seems." The air cleared slowly. And the creature still moved. Just barely. The makeshift curse's body twitched violently, its cracked limbs reorienting. Then it lunged. Straight at Yuji, the one who it had been pointed towards from the beginning. Faster than before, with wings flaring and every bladed limb snapping forward in a deadly, desperate final strike. Yuji braced. But it never reached him. A single silver line tore across the air. The creature stopped mid-leap. Then its upper half slid away from its lower, cleanly cleaved, as cursed blood sprayed into the grass behind it. The two halves fell. Behind them stood a tall figure in dark, shapeless clothing. His pale skin seemed to glow faintly in the shade. Mahito. He lowered his outstretched hand, where a long blade of transfigured flesh folded itself neatly back into his palm. Like it had never been there at all. He smiled. Now that was close. The self-destruct failsafe must have been affected by the forceful merger of three fly soldiers. Interesting results. Yuji stumbled back, caught between shock and instinct. "You." There was certainly recognition in his voice. His expression immediately became complex. Mahito turned, as if surprised to be noticed. "Ah, Itadori Yuji. You and your friends all right?" Megumi's shadow stretched behind him. Nobara lifted her hammer but didn't step forward. Mahito raised both hands in a calm, almost casual gesture. No need to get jumpy. I'm not here to fight. You just cut that thing down, Megumi said cautiously. Why? Mahito tilted his head slightly, like the question amused him. Is it strange to want to help? Nobara narrowed her eyes. Yes. They had both seemingly been informed about Mahito's existence, either by Itadori himself or by Gojo, warning them of a possible future meeting and to stay alert. Though no jujitsu sorcerer is worth his salt needed a reminder to stay alert when in the presence of a special grade curse. Especially when they had zero knowledge of its cursed technique. Mahito gave a soft chuckle. Well, I saw something nasty flying in this direction and figured I'd tag along. Never hurts to lend a hand, does it? Yuji's fists trembled. He didn't relax, but he didn't charge either. I don't trust you. Good, Mahito said simply. You shouldn't. He walked slowly toward the bisected creature that was currently still in the process of burning up and disappearing. It was taking longer due to the number of souls that were being exorcised, yet another interesting facet that Mahito took a mental note of. Ugly thing, wasn't it? Fast too. You're a cursed spirit, Nobara said flatly. Why help us? Mahito smiled wider. Why not? Not everything has to be a bloodbath. Good and evil are interchangeable in life. Megumi's fingers twitched. I don't know what you are trying to gain, but things won't go your way. His skeptical gaze washed over Mahito, who just shrugged. Hey now, I am not trying to hide my intentions here, Mahito said, a gentle smile appearing on his face. Everyone's always looking to gain something. I just prefer when things are mutually beneficial. He looked at Yuji again. This time, more intently. I've been curious about you, Itadori, obviously. I wish to learn more about you. Yuji's jaw tightened. You're not getting near Sukuna. Relax. I didn't come for him. Mahito's tone shifted slightly. Not cold, but almost gentle. I came because I wanted to see how you were faring in this world. Jujitsu sorcery isn't a pleasant job to undertake, though I'm sure you've already encountered the bloody, darker parts of it. Enough with the blabber. No one's buying it. Megumi said, his fists clenched as he seemed to be almost prepared to summon something from his shadow. Mahito glanced at him, then at Nobara, then back to Yuji. I'm not your enemy. That's all. He stepped away from the corpse. If I were, you'd already know. Then, as if remembering something, he paused. You're stronger than the last time I saw you. Yuji blinked. What? Just an observation. Mahito smiled again. Calm. Measured. Nothing chaotic in it. I'll be seeing you, Yuji. Hopefully not in the middle of another mess like this one. And just like that, he turned and walked into the tree line. No ripple of cursed energy. No domain. Just fading footsteps. Megumi let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Nobara lowered her hammer, reluctantly. Yuji stood frozen. He helped us, he said quietly. That doesn't make him a friend, Megumi replied. Nope, Nobara added. I ain't buying any of the bullshit he spouted either. The three stood in silence, the air still tense with fading cursed energy. Then, faintly, almost too late. Though he would call it, fashionably late. Gojo appeared behind them, arms crossed, hair spiked from the breeze. You all okay? They turned. Gojo looked toward the body of the curse that was still slowly burning away. Well. That's new. Yuji swallowed. He showed up, that Mahito curse. Killed it before it could land one last hit. Gojo's face didn't shift, but his voice did. He saved you? Megumi shook his head, not wanting to be put in the same boat as Yuji. To be more precise, he saved Itadori. Gojo stepped forward, inspecting the corpse. The body was already starting to wither, the natural decay of cursed remains setting in. Itadori, huh? That's concerning, he said softly. Nobara frowned. Why? Gojo straightened. His expression was serious now. Second time he's shown interest in you. Gojo smiled as she pointed at Yuji, his head tilted as his white hair swayed to the side. I guess it's about time I meet him, then. He's not that far from here, seems to be expecting me too. The air shimmered faintly, like heat rising off stone. Gojo stood at the forest's edge, hands in his pockets, white hair stirring lightly in the wind. Across from him, half sitting on a crooked fallen tree, Mahito waited with his usual soft smile. You took your time, the curse said casually, glancing toward the horizon. Gojo didn't answer right away. He simply stepped forward, his blindfold shifting slightly. I wanted to see if you'd run. Mahito tilted his head, amused. Why would I run from someone I wanted to meet? Gojo stopped 10 paces away. Not close enough for a handshake. Not far enough to feel like conversation wasn't possible. You don't strike me as suicidal. I'm not, Mahito said, smile still present. But I'm also not interested in making an enemy out of you. Gojo raised an eyebrow beneath the blindfold. That so? I don't care about Jujutsu Society, Mahito continued. The elders, the rules, the rankings. None of that matters to me. His hands rested lazily in his lap. He looked calm. Relaxed. But you're different. You're the pinnacle, aren't you? The peak of the current generation. Gojo's smirk tugged upward slightly. I'm flattered. Mahito's expression didn't shift. I didn't come here to fight. You already knew that, didn't you? Gojo gave a half shrug. Figured. But I had to see it for myself. He stepped a little closer, stopping at a slight incline of the hill. You didn't build that thing that attacked my students? No, Mahito said, without hesitation. I found it wandering and followed it here. Fast and nasty. But unfamiliar. Gojo studied him. It wasn't the kind of lie he could easily disprove. Not without proof. Not without assuming things. And you just decided to help. Mahito smiled faintly. You think I'm lying? I think it's odd. Helping is odd, Mahito agreed. But interesting outcomes often come from unexpected choices. Another silence passed. Gojo tapped his fingers against his thigh once. Gojo studied him for a moment. You're trying to play a long game. I already am. A pause settled. Wind rustled the leaves above them. Somewhere distant, a bird called out. Neither moved. Then Mahito spoke again. I have a request. Gojo blinked once behind the blindfold. From me? Only from you. That got the sorcerer's full attention. His stance shifted, just slightly. I want to see your domain expansion, Mahito said. Not just hear about it in theory. Not through second-hand reports. His voice didn't rise. Didn't press. I want to experience it. Here. Now. Just for a moment. Gojo tilted his head. You're asking to be trapped in infinite void. I'm not asking you to kill me, Mahito replied evenly. Just to show me the peak. The height of modern jujutsu sorcery. You said it yourself once, didn't you? He smiled wider. Throughout heaven and earth, You alone are the honored one. Gojo chuckled. You really did your homework. Wasn't aware anyone was around for that. I respect strength, Mahito said. That silenced them both for a moment. Gojo stared at him. Really stared. It wasn't playful, now. It was measuring. Calculating. You know what happens to most when they see it, even for less than a second? I do. And you're still asking? I am. Gojo's fingers twitched once at his side. Then he sighed. Fine. But if you melt or go brain dead, you have no one to blame but yourself. Mahito stood up, arms loose at his sides. I accept that risk. A pulse of cursed energy snapped through the clearing. Gojo's form shifted. Calmness became clarity. Laziness became focus. He raised one hand slowly. Don't blink. The world went silent. As one of Gojo's hands moved to shift his blindfold, revealing his shining blue eyes. The other moved to form a sign that Mahito was already familiar with. Infinity. Domain expansion. Then the void opened. The air became nothing. Everything. Infinite knowledge poured through every nerve, every sense, every inch of existence. It was like falling into a sea of stars, only to realize each one was an idea, a shape, a concept too vast to name. Infinite void. Mahito didn't scream. He couldn't to begin with. He didn't move. But even if he could have, he didn't want to. That infinite knowledge, that incomplete information infinitely blasted into his mind, into his very soul. His body trembled. His soul writhed. But he stood. Maybe exactly because his soul was abnormal, but he felt that he could withstand it. Though not for long. Gojo watched. No expression on his face. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Then the domain collapsed in on itself, cleanly, quietly. The clearing returned. But Mahito didn't return immediately. No, it took around 2 minutes for him to return to his senses. The special grade curse exhaled slowly. His knees buckled for a moment, then held firm. That was a lot faster than I expected. Gojo let out a low breath, watching him carefully. And look at that, he said. You're still standing. Mahito looked up. His eyes were wide, but not panicked. Beautiful, he whispered. Gojo blinked. His blue eyes still shining as he watched the cursed energy flicker within Mahito. You really are insane. Mahito's grin returned. Slower this time. Less playful. More reverent. That was worth every risk. Gojo raised one brow. You planning to imitate it? No, Mahito said, shaking his head. That would be meaningless. Then why? Mahito's gaze met his. To know how far there is left to climb. Gojo didn't reply at first. You wish to reach me? His tone was hard to read for a second, but Mahito could tell that it was not fully friendly. Had it been any one of his students showcasing such ambition, he would have been beyond ecstatic. But the one in front of him was a special grade curse. A being born of malice. Maybe I wish to one day stand beside you at the very pinnacle. I get the feeling I'll need at least that much strength to live freely. Mahito knew his worries. He knew Gojo quite well after all, though only as a character on a screen or page. But in his current state of mind, he couldn't be bothered to hide his intentions. It was a miracle his mind wasn't fried. Live freely? Is that all your ambitions amount to? Gojo could also tell that the curse in front of him was being honest for once. He knew best the effects that his domain could have on others after all. Is that all? He says, ha ha ha. Mahito couldn't help but laugh loudly as he heard those words coming from Gojo's mouth. You really can tell you're the strongest. To you, it's something you can take for granted, I guess. Gojo's eyebrows tightened slightly as he heard those words. A strange memory seemed to well up within him. A conversation that happened in a crowded street. One that he hadn't managed to comprehend fully at that time. Everyone else has to bend a bit to survive in this world, but you? You can be unabashedly, you. Gojo covered his eyes, not wanting to show the curse the sadness which had crept into his gaze. Of course, he knew that now. He knew the meaning of those words. I only wish I had learned sooner. Maybe Geto wouldn't have, no point in dwelling on that at this point. Gojo shook his head, then nodded towards the curse in front of him. I'll admit, you're not what I expected. And you're exactly what I hoped you'd be, Mahito said, stepping back toward the fallen tree. He sat once more, hands folded in his lap. Gojo didn't follow. I have many questions for you. But we can get to those another day, let your mind recover a bit more. He asked, voice casual. Mahito tilted his head, some purplish blood flowing out of his nose. Thank you for indulging me. Gojo smirked, turned, and started walking away. Weirdo, I'll seek you out next time, don't avoid me. Mahito said nothing. Just smiled calmly as he wiped the blood from his nose and nodded. The wind picked up again. Gojo disappeared into the trees. Mahito remained seated, eyes distant, a smile still playing at the corners of his lips. He had seen it. The peak. And now, the climb could begin. The forest had returned to stillness. Yet Yuji Itadori's mind had not. He stood alone beside the creek, the fading light of the afternoon sky painting his reflection in rippling shades of orange and silver. The bruises on his arms were faint now, healing fast, but his breath still caught sometimes when he replayed it. The way the creature moved. The way Mahito had stepped in. He didn't know what to make of the situation at all. You alright? Megumi's voice came low behind him. Yuji didn't answer immediately. He kept watching the water, watching the warped reflection of his own face shift with every disturbance. He saved me, Yuji said eventually. His voice wasn't full of gratitude. It wasn't shaken either. It was something more complicated. He stepped in at the last second. Killed it like it was nothing. Megumi stepped closer, standing just behind him. Doesn't mean anything. It does to me. And to him, said a third voice. Nobara walked into view, brushing dirt from her skirt. She sat on a mossy rock, arms resting on her knees. Yuji turned slightly, confused. If he wanted you dead, he could have killed you a dozen times by now. Especially since it seems like he's tracking you. I am not buying the whole ran into you bullshit trope. Nobara said. He hasn't made a move against you, though. That means he wants something else. That's the problem, Yuji said, hands curling at his sides. He's not acting like a monster. Not even like an enemy. I don't really know how to handle this. Megumi frowned. Not killing or attacking you doesn't make him an ally, Itadori. It is confusing as hell though, Nobara added. He looked shady. He probably wants something big. Yuji looked down at his fist, still scuffed from the battle. Then we should find out what. The Elder's chamber was carved from stone older than any city still standing. Shadows clung to the corners, drawn to the silence that lingered between its high walls. 8 elders sat in a half-circle, faces half-shrouded under the folds of ancient ceremonial cloth. Symbols of authority hung behind them. The room smelled faintly of ink, parchment, and old curses sealed long ago. Gojo Satoru stood at the center of the room. He wasn't kneeling. He wasn't even formally dressed. His blindfold was up just enough to show his glinting blue eyes, and his hands were tucked lazily into his jacket pockets. He looked more like someone waiting for coffee than someone being interrogated. He appeared in front of the first years unprovoked, one elder said. The old man's voice trembled slightly, but not from age. He exorcised a curse that was attacking them, Gojo replied, his tone relaxed. You allowed a special grade to walk away. Again. I evaluated the situation and acted accordingly. He was not hostile. You should have eliminated him. Gojo's smile twitched upward. You should try doing that yourself sometime. The chamber went still. None of the elders spoke. One of them, an old man in a darker robe, finally found the nerve to continue. This isn't a game, Satoru. Curses like that grow stronger every day. So do my students. You're being reckless. And you are all on the cusp of being irrelevant, Gojo said plainly. The words echoed off the stone. You called me here to report. I've done that. I've shared what I saw. You can do whatever you want with the information. But you don't tell me how to handle my students or my enemies. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. Even a whisper from him carried enough strength to silence the room. I know you hate being powerless. But that's what you are. Compared to what's out there, to what's coming, you're already fossils. Another silence fell. Then Gojo turned to leave. Not a single elder moved to stop him. Far beneath the surface of the city, Mahito stood still within his chamber. The remains of failed fly soldiers lined the outer edges like discarded sketches. Bits of fused bone, mismatched limbs, still twitching husks. He ignored them. All of his focus was inward now. He closed his eyes. Beneath his skin, cursed energy pulsed and twisted, not with rage or chaos, but with clarity. He was learning. Faster than even he had expected. He recalled Gojo's domain. The blinding infinity of it. The sensation of every neuron flooding with the raw essence of understanding, so fast the mind couldn't hold on. That was the shape of the peak. But he would never reach it by imitation. No. He could never imitate Gojo, and imitating the original Mahito was useless as well. His domain had to be his own, or at least he had to make his own interpretation of it to some extent. A domain is a representation of one's technique in a way. That was how Gojo's felt at least. He raised both arms. His hands formed signs which felt most natural for him in that moment. He whispered the words. Domain expansion. The chamber shook slightly. Thin lines of cursed energy spread like veins through the walls. Bones spiraled upward. Flesh pulsed outward like muscle forming around a skeleton. Embo dash. He could not even utter the name of his domain. He couldn't finish it. Not quite yet. The words tasted like iron. A dome had only barely formed around him, it was raw. Unfinished. The cursed energy spiraled too fast at the edges, unraveling as quickly as it formed. The interior walls rippled like water disturbed by a storm. His cursed energy snapped, like a stretched tendon tearing at the root. Heat surged in his skull. Too fast. Too unstable. Every part of him screamed to hold steady. But his soul sang with the chaos. The walls cracked like glass. The bone split. The cursed energy imploded inward. Mahito dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Purple blood dripped from his nose, steaming slightly in the air. He looked down at his trembling hands. Mahito stood in the center of it all. His body began to shift as his mind took the brunt of the hit of his failed domain, His form split, reformed, melted and sharpened again. He could do it. He had learned to perfectly heal his mind after a failed domain expansion. This was not his first attempt. Closer, he whispered. Still not there, but closer. His smile returned, slow and satisfied. Gojo's words echoed in his mind. So did his domain. Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. Mahito stood again. Maybe for now. But not forever. He turned, facing the scorched line where his domain had collapsed. There's room for one more. He sat cross-legged in the center of the debris. I won't stop until I reach the top of Jujutsu sorcery. It doesn't matter that I am a curse. The chamber was dim and warm, lit by the faint glow of residual cursed energy. Steam drifted from cracks in the stone walls, and the air pulsed like it was breathing. Mahito sat on a crooked stone, legs swinging like a child's. His fingers tapped an uneven rhythm against his thigh as he traced lines in the dust with his foot. He wasn't working. Not on fly soldiers, not on bodies, not on anything that mattered. Not while others were watching. He'd learned that part well. Idle transfiguration, the real thing, that stayed hidden. Kenjaku only knew a part of it. And Mahito wanted it to remain like that, at least for now. He liked it that way. So, for now, he played. Hummed. Waited. Because he knew that someone, or something, was coming his way. He had developed a sort of network within those sewers, small transfigured curses that he controlled reported to him whenever seeing something. They were too similar to regular fly heads for anyone to tell the difference, so they could fly under the radar. He tossed a piece of bone in the air and caught it again. Not a cursed tool. Not useful. Just something to fidget with. And then the air changed. Thick. Heavy. Still. The roots came first, sliding down the corridor like veins searching for a heartbeat. They twisted around cracks and stone, brushing the old dust away. Then came Hanami. A tangle of bark and bloom, of stillness and slow violence. Her presence seeped into the room like shade crawling over the forest floor. Mahito perked up, hands clapping once. Hanami, you came. I didn't bring tea. Or cake. But I have a shiny rock. He held up something vaguely round and definitely not a rock. Hanami's figure didn't change at all, her face remaining expressionless. Her voice entered his mind, carried like wind through dead trees. Your speech has improved. Good. Kenjaku has given instructions. You are to come. Now. Mahito tilted his head and leaned forward, poking at the floor with his toe. Already? But the moon's not even full. We attack during the school event. Disrupt the students. Create confusion. Draw attention. Mahito blinked slowly, then grinned, sharp and soft all at once. Uhu, the one with all the uniforms and shouting and friendship punching. That one, I read a few manga like that. Hanami didn't respond directly. But her roots began to recede. She turned. Mahito followed with a skip in his step, arms swinging wide. Do I get to pick someone to fight this time? I wanna see the one with the nails again. She was spicy. Stick to the plan. Do not stray. Take a few moments to collect yourself, I'll wait for you at the entrance. Stick. Very well, I will go and get some things, return to you in a bit. Hanami nodded, turning away and leaving the sewers, clearly not liking the surrounding areas too much. The stench was one thing, but being so far away from nature was annoying to the special grade curse. Mahito's expression changed entirely when Hanami left sight. It gained a profound coldness, losing all other emotions. All but one. Excitement. So it's already time, huh? Better prepare mentally for this. High above the city, behind soundproof glass and reinforced charm barriers, Mei poured herself a drink. The amber liquid swirled lazily as she watched it catch the light. The crow at her window shifted once, tilting its head. Then the phone on her desk lit up, just once, soft and violet. She tapped it. Mahito. Mei-chan. His tone was smooth this time. Almost polite. A practiced calm wrapped in lazy charm. You're calling early, she said, swirling her drink. The elders haven't made the latest payment yet, don't worry, you'll get your cut. MMH. No, just thought I'd give you a whisper in advance. Things are moving, you know. Something big is happening soon on your end, too, right? Her brow arched slightly. School event? I'm the guest of honor this year. Flowerface and I are showing up for a little garden party. Mei didn't change expressions. And you're offering intel ahead of time. Mahito chuckled. Just a teaser. The good stuff comes after. Once the shouting's done. When everything's messy and interesting. You want a new cut? Nope. Just the usual. 25% minus any additional operating costs and assistance you may provide. Mei set her drink down. You don't ask for a lot, thankfully. One of my least troublesome connections. True. I do like building trust first, which is why I'm giving you a heads up. The leader is aiming for something else, this is just a distraction. Don't know the full details yet, we'll keep you posted. You realize Gojo will be present, right? Planning to survive? Very much. Dying's boring. I am not on bad terms with Gojo yet, and I am not stupid enough to attack his students. Don't worry too much about what I'll be doing. With that, Mahito ended the call, leaving Mei to squint at the phone with a curious gaze. What a predicament. He may lose his role among the curses if he's not careful. That would make him less profitable. Mei ended the call without another word. UI. The boy appeared at her side in a blink. Yes, sister. Add a note to the Kyoto exchange file. Potential interference from unregistered special grades. Use vague language. No need to alarm the elders, but inform both schools. Right away. She picked up her glass again, gazing out at the skyline. Let's see what our new business partner has in store for us. Elsewhere, in the tree line above the Kyoto perimeter, Mahito crouched on a branch. The event had not yet begun. But the players were gathering. He watched the students in the far distance. Laughing. Stretching. Plotting against one another. One side was preparing for battle like it was a school game, while another seemed to be preparing for something more. Yuji was there. So was the girl with the nails, Kujisaki. The 10 Shadows wielder, Megumi. Their seniors were also present, faces Mahito already knew. Panda, Maki, Inumaki. He was far enough to watch, but not close enough to be sensed. He hadn't entered the barrier of Jujutsu High, as he needed to wait for a signal. The anti-Gojo barrier needed to be put up too, which would take a few seconds. Mahito tilted his head and smiled. He hadn't decided if he would fight this time. Or talk. Sometimes talking was better. He pressed a finger to the bark of the tree and let cursed energy flow into it, just enough to leave a scar on the wood. He didn't need to win anything here. Just move the game forward. After all, the curtain was rising. And Mahito? He always liked to make his entrance just a little late. The Kyoto exchange grounds were no longer festive. They were a battlefield. The sky was thick with dust and blooming, cursed energy. Broken barriers flickered in and out of visibility above the arena. Trees were uprooted, the ground torn, and buildings reduced to cracked silhouettes in the haze. Where students had once stood in formation, only chaos remained. Haruta Shigemo swung his sword in a lazy circle, grinning wide beneath blood-stained cheeks. His body danced between cursed traps and incoming projectiles like he was untouchable. A carefree smile that knew luck, not skill, would save him every time. Opposite him, Yutahime Iori crouched low, fingers pressed against the edge of a glowing charm she had just activated. To her left, Mai Zenin aimed down her scope again, already loading the next round. Her right eye bled freely, but her hands were steady. Keep his attention. Yutahime barked. Mai fired without responding. The bullet cracked through the air, glowing faintly with infused cursed energy. It should have hit Haruta clean in the shoulder. But it didn't. At the last second, he slipped just enough to make it glance off, tumbling backward dramatically, landing with a laugh. You. Close one. You ladies are really making me sweat. Yutahime narrowed her eyes. He doesn't dodge. He stumbles out of danger. What kind of technique is that? Mai grit her teeth. Not a technique. Dumb luck. Haruta gave a theatrical bow. Lady Luck's on my side. Or maybe you're just unlucky. He lunged forward without warning. The sword slashed in a wide arc, nearly slicing Mai's shoulder clean through. Yutahime threw a charm, intercepting the blade mid-swing, but it only slowed the impact. Mai was knocked backwards. Blood splattered from a shallow cut on her side. Yutahime caught her before she hit the ground. Haruta twirled his sword again. Maybe you two should just lie down and let fate decide. I like it when my opponents surrender. Not happening, Yutahime said sharply. She pressed her palm into another charm. Blue light flared from the paper seal, and a protective barrier sparked up between them. Mai stood, bleeding but unshaken. We hold out long enough, someone stronger will come. Think we can buy that much time? Yutahime asked. We don't have a choice. Haruta charged again. But he never reached them. A thin hand clasped around his neck from behind. He froze. The sword dropped with a dull clang. His entire body seized, eyes wide in realization. Why are you dash? He gasped. Mahito's voice hummed behind his ear, soft and cheerful. No miracles can save you from this one. Haruta's body began to ripple. His technique that used stocked-up miracles could save his life against a great threat a few times a day. But no amount of miracles could save someone when their very soul was already in Mahito's hand. His skin pulsed. His limbs twitched as if trying to pull away from themselves. Then he screamed. In a single grotesque moment, his body warped unnaturally, like flesh turned inside out, and then burst. Blood and fragments of bone splattered across the ruined earth. Mahito let the remains slide from his fingers. Yutahime stared in stunned silence. Mai lowered her weapon, slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she wondered if her gun could even do anything against the being that had just appeared. Mahito turned toward them, smiling. Hello again, did I interrupt something? On the other side of the arena, the sky was bleeding blossoms. Hanami stood amidst a grove of her own making, roots twisted upward into spears and limbs, cursed flowers pulsing at their tips. Each petal hummed with repressed energy, sapping the will to fight. Yuji Itadori gritted his teeth, pushing forward despite the pressure bearing down on his chest. Beside him, Aoi Todo weaved through the roots, clapping mid-motion to switch places with Yuji again and again, forcing Hanami to defend from both sides. Don't slow down, brother. Todo shouted. I'm not. Yuji roared. They struck from above and below in perfect rhythm. Hanami's roots lashed out, weaving into a wall of bark and bloom. Her cursed energy soaked the battlefield, causing the earth to bloom with flowers that leached their strength. Yuji punched through one, letting his cursed energy burn the vines from his skin. Hanami raised one arm, releasing a pulse of spores. Todo blinked behind her with a clap and drove an elbow into her back. She staggered, only for Yuji to close the gap, winding up a punch. The air tightened. And Yuji struck. The sound cracked through the sky like a thunderclap. His fist collided with Hanami's torso, and the cursed energy followed, not at the same time, but an instant later. A perfect delay. Black flash. Hanami reeled backwards, her body breaking branches as she crashed through the roots she had conjured. Yuji landed, breathing hard, his hand trembling. Todo grinned. Good job, brother. Just a bit more to go. But Hanami did not fall. Her body regrew the shattered wood and bark, her mask-like face cracking only slightly before mending. Her voice touched their minds once more. This forest will bury you. We'll turn it into firewood, Yuji snapped, rushing in again, to meet Hanami's roots head-on. Nanami arrived then, carving through a wave of branches with his blunt sword. He did not announce himself. He simply moved, landing a slash right on Hanami's arm before being pushed back by a wave of roots. This is getting out of hand, he said. Don't get tangled. Far from the fighting, beneath a hidden temple structure just outside Kyoto, Jogo stepped through a crumbling stone corridor. The armory was ancient. Carved long before the modern era. Few knew it existed. Fewer still were allowed entry. But Kenjaku had cleared the way. He passed through the final barrier without flinching. And in his hand, the prison realm pulsed faintly. Warm. Waiting. On a pedestal ahead lay relics of jujitsu history. Sealed cursed tools. Ancient charms. Enough power to change the balance of war. But he wasn't here for any of those. He stepped to the far wall and pressed the cube against the etched kanji of binding. The wall cracked. And opened. Jogo smiled. Prison realm, this thing better work.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.